And one day I walked in and my nurse, who was with me for over a decade, Wendy, she looked at me down the hall and she said, "Doc, you're getting fat." And I thought, well, good morning. How are you? And so I got on our hall scales, and that's when the 297 number came relevant. And I'm like, whoa, man, but my pants still fit. So I'm getting a big signal back. I was getting more signal back from this diet than I was getting from prescription medication, which the way I was trained, that's not supposed to be possible.
But you also have this other commonality that I'm sure you get from your colleagues, where it's a modern phenomenon, where doctors will say, yeah, but patients want a pill.
Joint
Very
pain.
common.
And so the guy that initially was walking with 2 canes, then 1 cane, then no canes, called his orthopedic surgeon and canceled the knee replacements. And
Wow.
to this day, he still hasn't had his knees replaced.
Wow.
And I saw his bone on bone. And a few months later, I came home from the clinic and she said, "How many people did you help today?" And I said, "I don't know, 30, 35. She said, "Wouldn't it have been awesome if you could have helped 35,000 people today?" Now, a good husband knows when to keep his mouth shut. And he also knows when to admit that his wife is right.
Amen. You guys ready to rock and roll? Tell me who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ken Berry. I'm a board-certified family physician. I've been practicing family medicine for almost 23 years now, which sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. Started about a decade ago, really getting interested in diet and nutrition and the kind of the interface between human biology and human nutrition. And classically trained allopathic physicians don't really think that diet matters much. You can eat pretty much whatever, almost as if humans are magical, right? It's whatever, jelly donut or beef liver, it's about the same. But if you do have trouble, we can always write you a prescription, And so that never set right with me, even in medical school before graduation. It didn't sit right so we really don't care as doctors what you do, what you eat. We say move more and eat less, but we don't really, there's no rubber meeting that road really, right? There's always a dietary handout, but there's never any kind of, emphasis on that. It's just, here's a PDF, now go about your life, and I'll see you in 6 months and check the real things that matter, which is labs and your refills, because those are the things that really matter. But also, here's a diet. If you want to mess around with this, that's fine. So I was severely obese and pre-diabetic, and which, that happens to grown-ups. But here I was, a doctor, trying to tell people how to be healthy, how to stay healthy, and I wasn't healthy. And that also didn't sit right with me. And I was also not really doing anything about that. I was very busy, had 2 or 3 full-time jobs, and was eating whatever and never really exercising much. But the epiphany came when I jumped on a scale and I was 297 pounds, and my A1C was 6.1. And I said, okay.
About what year was this?
Oh, that was 10, 11, 12. That was probably 11, 12, 13 years ago. I'm terrible with time. Part of my special brain superpowers. I can't tell you the difference between last week and last year.
Well, if you listen to my podcast, I like to get a little bit back.
Yeah.
And I especially like to find, when people's health was, when it was falling off.
Mm-hmm.
But for doctors, I'm always interested in when you first decided you wanted to become a doctor.
Mm.
When was that?
I don't think there was ever a time when I didn't want to be a doctor.
Really?
Growing up, when I can remember being 6, 7, 8 years old, watching MASH and Trapper John MD and Quincy, and basically any medical show that was on TV. There used to be, when I was really young, there was this paramedic show, and it was about firemen, which also would have been fine with me. I could have been a fireman. That would have been good because they were like firemen / paramedics. And there would always be a criminal, and they would always shoot him in the knee and then would immediately render medical aid to him. And so, yeah, and always wanted to be a doctor. Never really, I mean, I contemplated an astronaut, professional football player, I toyed around with things, but really the doctor thing was always what I felt called to do from quite young. And then I had a family doctor growing up who I just idolized. He was a bit of a maverick. He came to work on his Harley Davidson, and he was a GP in the classic sense. He was broadly trained. He did all kinds of surgery, all kinds of obstetrics, and then family medicine, internal medicine. They used to train him to go to rural towns, and you were the doctor. You did everything, and there was always a little local hospital, and they used to do thyroidectomies at this tiny hospital, which now, if you say that in the presence of a surgeon, their blood pressure goes up. Like, what do you mean? Thyroidectomies in a 40-bed rural hospital? Yeah, they just did what needed to be done. And so this guy, he would come into the clinic drunk, and he'd be hungover, and he wrecked numerous BMWs and Mercedes. He was just just that old renegade doctor that didn't care. When I had my tonsils out when I was 5, he got in a literal fisticuff fight with the surgeon and broke his ribs and put the surgeon in the hospital and wound up losing his privileges. And so I just thought he was the coolest doctor on earth, right? How could you not, right? And so I just always wanted to be a doctor, and not without the alcohol and the car wrecks and that stuff, yeah.
But you're setting the stage for us. You were in a small town.
Very.
And when you're in a smaller town, and I know this from having family that are in smaller towns, my dad is currently in a small town, 1,800 people. And opportunities tend to appear around them. So it's probably more around farming, for example. Things like becoming a medical professional. That's interesting, but whew, that's a big hill to climb.
Well, and let me just add, I had no idea how I was going to do that. I had no idea what the path was from where I was to being a doctor. I had no idea how I was going to get there. But I just knew I really wanted to do that. And so about 30 miles up the road, we had a little community college that you could take a 2-year course and become a radiologic technologist, shoot x-rays. And so I thought, well, I'll give that a try. And that's kind of proof of concept. If I can handle that, the blood in the guts and the vomit and the other bodily secretions, then okay, then I'll see if I can figure out how to get to medical school. And so I did that and had a great time doing that. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. This is easy. And so I also got to work with doctors. And I was usually the x-ray tech on call for 48 hours on the weekend at another very tiny community, local rural hospital. And so I would be on call for 48 hours on the weekends and shoot x-rays when they needed that. But otherwise I was studying or other things on my call time. And so I got to hang out with the docs and talk to them. And at some point I realized, so they're just real people. Like they're not Quincy and, Hawkeye. They're actually just dudes. Okay, so maybe I could actually do that. And they would also be like, oh, you want to go to med school? Okay, well, here's what you need to do. And so they kind of opened up a few little doors so I could see a path. Like, oh, okay, maybe I could go from Hohenwald, Tennessee. The entire county, I think, is population 14,000. and maybe I could figure out a way to get there.
So, did you end up going into debt like so many other people do?
Oh, yeah. Still got my medical debt today.
Wow.
Yeah, paying the minimum on it. I'm going to let inflation take care of it. Yeah.
And so you paid your way through medical school?
I borrowed my way through medical school, yeah. And for the first year, I was actually working full-time as an x-ray tech, which was expressly forbidden. But like I said, I would go to this rural hospital and I'd be on call for 48 hours from Friday at 6 till Sunday at 6. And I could study as many hours as I wanted to. They had an intensive care unit, I think a 6-bed ICU at this hospital, but they couldn't afford the liability, so they'd shut that down. And so for the weekend, that was my call suite. So I had this 20-foot long ICU nurses station, and I would spread all my undergraduate books out, and just with my ADHD brain, I would study 20 minutes of biochemistry, 20 minutes of American Lit, and then just go down the desk and then go do other stuff. And I had a lot of adventures when I was an x-ray tech. I had a lot of fun. And but that's basically how I cut my teeth and turned being a doctor from a dream into, hey, there's actually a path for that. I could get there from here.
Now, did you ever think about a different specialty as a doctor?
Yes, I had no intention of being family medicine when I went to medical school. I went to medical school to be a surgeon. There was no option other than I was going to be a surgeon, until I realized that if you're a surgeon, your day starts at 4 a.m. for the rest of your life. And that was not okay with me. At that time, I was 100% a night owl, so there's no way I could do that. And then also I realized that if you just do your surgery residency, basically the only surgeries you get to do are guts and butts, right? That's all you do. And so I'm like, well, I'd have to, if I did another year, I could be urology. If I did another, 3 or 4 years, I could do cardiothoracic. I don't know. So then I thought, well, OBGYN, they do lots of surgery. I could do that and so I pursued that for a while until I found out that all women go into labor at 4:30 a.m. And so not only would my day start at 4:30 a.m., I would have to get up in the middle of the night to start. So that was out because I had a little family, and so there's no way that was going to work.
Can I add something for the benefit of the audience?
Yeah.
Your story, like so many young doctor stories, there seems to be a kind of a stigma with family medicine for those going into the medical profession that I don't love. Yep. Because it's kind of like, oh, well, what amazing specialty are you going to go into? I mean, obviously, if you can't seem to make any of these work, there's always family medicine.
And that's exactly the way it's looked at in medical school. Primary care, internal medicine, family medicine, they're at the bottom of the pecking order in medical school and in residency. But one thing that helped me several things helped me make my mind up to finally choose family medicine. But one was an old attending doctor said, yeah, that's how it is in medical school and residency. But when you get out, that actually flips because you're the guy that gives the referrals. And if a surgeon is not a good guy or a nice guy, you just don't ever refer anybody to him. And I was like, oh, okay, so there is a little bit of a power dynamic there that's not, completely embarrassing. Okay. And then at the University of Tennessee in Memphis, we had a great group of attending physicians and professors, and they actually believed in a model called advanced family medicine. And so we did lots of obstetrics. I think during my family medicine residency, which I did an advanced family medicine residency, which combines your 4th year of med school with your intern year. And Nick can imagine that. 4th year is not that hard, really, but you're right. And so I basically combined the 4th year with my intern year. And so I was able to do a 3-year residency in 2 years. the advanced family medicine, they did lots of procedures. We did EGDs, we did colonoscopies, we delivered so many babies. I first assisted on so many C-sections. We did
Just can't escape that 4 a.m. call time sometimes.
Right, but I wound up not doing OB when I got out, but I loved the obstetrics, loved it a lot, but not enough to get up at 4 o'clock every morning for the rest of my career. But we did very procedure heavy. And so one of my professors there said, the kind of family medicine we practice is less about nouns and more about verbs. We actually do biopsies, and we, excise things, and we actually do things. We do procedures. And so I was like, oh, I can dig this, because I can start at 8 a.m. and I can literally tailor my practice to do as many procedures as I want to do. And so at my clinic, I had a full day that was just a procedure day, and then another half day that I would work in procedures. And so I was doing all kinds of procedures as a family medicine specialist. And that was very nice. I loved that a lot.
Now, at this point in time in your burgeoning career, how was your health?
In medical school, it was fine. All my life, I'd been very lean. Lean to the point that it made me uncomfortable. Like when I graduated high school, I was this tall, and I think I weighed 185 pounds. And so very, very thin, could not gain any muscle. I played 3 sports in school, was in the field house lifting weights, literally to no avail whatsoever. I was just a beanpole. And right about 32, 33 years of age, that's when that started to subtly shift. And then you can imagine if I had this self-image of being too thin for all these years, and now I'd actually gained some weight, I was, okay, good. Obviously, it wasn't muscle, but it was weight. And also, keep in mind, I'm working full-time in the clinic and also full-time in the ER. That's the other thing about family medicine. If you're trained on the advanced trajectory, is you can work in the ER, because you've done so many shoulder relocations, hip relocations, set so many bones. We did all that stuff in residency. So I was completely comfortable working in the ER. And so I was working 45, 50 hours a week in the clinic, and then another 36 to 48 hours in the ER. And the ER was emergency department. That was typically 7P to 7A, and then I would go work in the clinic all day, and then take a day off, and then I did that for years. And so I lived in scrubs. And I'm very tall, so I had to have extra large scrubs for the length, otherwise they'd be high waters. And so scrubs have a very, very ample drawstring.
Yeah.
Especially with the extra long length. And so my pants always fit, and they fit perfectly, no matter the weight I was gaining, right? And so I never cared about health, because I was always skinny, always healthy. I didn't think about me as a human, that my health might ever be an issue, right? I was worried about everybody else's health. But I kept having achy knees and heartburn, and I had rosacea, and I had just achy and yucky, just, didn't feel that young, vigorous feeling anymore. And one day I walked in, and my nurse, who was with me for over a decade, Wendy, she looked at me down the hall and she said, "Doc, you're getting fat." And I thought, well, good morning. How are you? And so I got on our hall scales, and that's when the 297 number came relevant. And I'm like, whoa, man, but my pants still fit.
And about how old were you at this point?
Mid-30s, yeah, 33, 4, 5, somewhere in there.
And if you're like me, because I was a rail, most of my life and into my 20s, I was used to hearing over and over again, well, you're so lucky, Dave. You've got a fast metabolism.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't gain any weight. So you can eat anything you want. So that I would internalize that. It's like, well, yeah, I wish I could put on weight. I wish I could put on muscle and so forth. But hey, at least I can eat anything I want. But that became then this kind of track in my brain that I didn't need to worry that much
Yeah.
about food because of this fast metabolism thing
Right.
that I had going on.
Right. And the fact that I was a doctor and still had basically that same belief, I think should speak to how doctors are trained about nutrition. Like that's just because you're thin, you and I now very well know you can be very metabolically unhealthy and be quite thin. How did I not know that as a board certified, licensed, practicing full-time physician? I had no idea. I thought, no, you're skinny, you're fine. Right? And so I was the doctor who literally would not check much lab work on you at all. If you came in and said, I don't feel good, and give me literally every symptom of early diabetes, I would have just checked a few limited labs and said, no, you're fine, Dave. I mean, your blood sugar's a little high, but
and frankly, to some degree, that's because you're informed by your own experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course. Yeah, of course. And that's very dangerous, though, which I now look back and see that is very, very dangerous. But that's kind of the way we were trained.
You had how much nutrition training as a doctor?
I was actually quite fortunate. I had, in my second year of med school, I had half a semester of nutrition and half a semester of behavioral health. And so for half the semester, we got nutrition, the second half, behavioral health. And I think that, a lot of medical schools have zero nutrition, which I understand now there's maybe a federal mandate that's going to change that. But just imagine what that would say to a young doctor. Nutrition and behavioral health are so unimportant that we're going to just do a half little semester here. And it was literally 1 day a week, 2 hours a week, 1 day a week. That's what the class was.
I've interviewed a bunch of doctors, as you know, for the podcast. I think you're the first doctor who had any that was part of their education at all.
But let me explain. So 90 to 95% of that course was about the feeding of patients who had been in a house fire and were in the burn unit, or had been in a rollover motor vehicle accident and had crushed their face so they couldn't eat, and so we were going to feed them intravenously. That's what 95% of that training was calculating the macros and the calories and how are you going to feed them, what are you going to use to feed this person who cannot eat food. Very little of it had anything to do with the care and feeding of humans out in their wild environment. And the professor, who was a PhD, was a type 1 diabetic from New Zealand. And he told us all about, very regularly, I can remember this vividly, he would tell us how he ate lots of whole wheat pasta because he was a type 1 diabetic. That's a literal quote. And he said that more than once. And so I walked away from this very inferior nutrition training thinking, okay, somehow whole wheat pasta is really good for people with type 1 diabetes. Okay, got it.
So you're getting through all this training. You're now fully into your practice. You now have a nurse, as you mentioned, has worked with you for a decade. She gives you that straight talk, right? And it's fascinating. I don't know about anybody else. I have a lot of memories where I've had the kind of friend that I think is your best kind of friend.
Mm-hmm.
A good friend tells you things you don't necessarily want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
but that they determine as your friend you need to hear it.
Yeah.
And that's what you got, right?
That's exactly what I got. I got tough love.
So what kind of diet did you want to go on after hearing that?
Well, I would have just cut back, but my A1C was 6.1. I was pre-diabetic. So I thought, well, okay. I had the PDF handout from the American Diabetes Association that I gave to every newly diagnosed diabetic. And so I just thought, well, I'll just take that home and follow that. And I guess I'll start jogging. And so I did that. I took that home and I followed it religiously. I stopped all bacon because that's obviously, not good for people with prediabetes for some reason. And I ate lots of whole grains. I ate lots more fruits and vegetables. No saturated fat. I stopped cooking with any kind of animal fat. It's just lots of bread, lots of vegetables, lots of fruits. And I did that for 3 months, and I jogged 2 or 3 days a week, depending on what my schedule would let me do. I had an old country road beside the house, and I would go run up and down Kelly Road, and hated it, every minute of it, hated jogging. But at that time, I had what were they, the iPod, remember that? Remember the iPod?
Yep.
But it was the big one. And so I could download continuing medical education on it. And so while I was jogging, I could listen to it. But back then, your ear things would fall out and your iPod would fall off and clatter on the road. It was not nearly as good as the earbuds are today. But so I would do that. And then after 3 months of that, I had gained another 2 or 3 pounds. And my A1C had actually went up a little more. And now that was the epiphany. Because I was already I didn't like my nutrition professor at all. He's very arrogant. And I didn't feel like he really taught us anything, which looking back now, I was completely right about that. But then after following, and so here's something you may not know. Doctors all suspect their patients of being non-compliant. Did you know that? You're lazy, you're just laying on the couch eating ding-dongs. But you see that this N=1 experiment that I did way back then.
Following the guidelines of the exact institution.
Yes.
That you
but
would
I
be
didn't
concerned
give
about.
that to somebody and then not see them again for 90 days.
Right.
I was there for the whole 90 days, and it really spooked me when I saw my A1C. So I was really serious about this. But when that didn't fix it, because I'd never had blood sugar problems ever my entire life, and now I did, and that didn't fix it. That was supposed to fix it, right? And so here's this N=1 experiment where jogging 2 or 3 days a week, and I really looked at the jogging as paying kind of penance. It was like punishment, right? I had taken my punishment, and it didn't help a bit. And that was the point where I'm like, so now I'm faced with the reality that all of my patients that I'd been silently judging for all those years, maybe they had been following my advice, because I thought they weren't following it at all, because every 3 or 6 months, their A1C was worse. We had to start a new medicine. I had to have the you've gained more weight talk again. But here I am. I'm living with the guy that did this. I'm there every day, and that didn't work. So at that point, I'm like, wow, okay, what am I going to do about this? Because coming from that small southern town, common sense rules the day, right? And so you don't take your car to a mechanic whose car won't start. You don't go get a haircut from a cosmetologist whose hair is messed up.
You don't get financial advice from somebody who's homeless.
Who lives behind the convenience store. Right, exactly, that's right. And so, but yet this fat pre-diabetic doctor is going to give nutrition and health advice? No, I don't think so. That's not going to work for me. And so I had to fix me, because I felt like a fraud. If I was, that couldn't be, I'm not going to do that for 30 years. No way. And so that's what led me down this road that brings us to this stage.
So what was your first introduction to literally shifting away from the ADA standard into low carb? What was your first?
My first 3 books were The Paleo Diet by Dr. Lauren Cordain, the Atkins Diet Revolution by Dr. Atkins, which I bought for 25 cents at a rummage sale, and The Primal Blueprint by Mark Sisson. Those were the first 3 books that I read outside of the box, mainstream medicine. And of course, before that, I'd already looked at all the nutrition literature and the diabetes literature, and it's just chronic progressive. There's not much you can do. You just, treat it. But I hadn't been diabetic before, and now I almost was. And so that just didn't compute with me. I couldn't be okay with that. So when I started Primal, which is very meat-heavy, Paleo, very meat-heavy, and then Atkins, also the first phase is very meat-heavy, I did that for 3 months, and I lost 20, 30 pounds right off the bat just from those minor changes. And the A1C immediately went back, I think, 5.7, almost to normal again. And after reading those books, that's, the internet was really coming to the front. Then you could really start to really be searching for stuff on the internet. And so I kept seeing this ketogenic and keto, I kept seeing that pop up here and there. And so I listened to a podcast or two, and I'm like, well, that makes sense, because what I've really done effectively is I've lowered the amount of carbohydrates I'm eating. I've stopped eating my nutrition professor's whole wheat bread and pasta, and I've started eating a lot more meat, and I've really just lowered the carbs, and that seemed to really help with both weight loss and lowering the A1C. So ketogenic is kind of the next step. And so I thought, okay, I'll give this a try. So I really cranked the carbs down. And after 6 months of that, I'd lost a significant chunk of weight. A1C was completely back to normal. Both of which, at that point, based on what I thought I had learned, that made sense. But there were several things that happened that did not make any sense. My rosacea got 80, 90% better. And so I never had severe rosacea, but I had to use a steroid cream once or twice a week to keep the redness at bay. My heartburn, which was so bad that I would take 2 Nexium every day. When the Nexium drug rep came, I got all the samples. Patients didn't get any of the samples. And I would take 2 a day to keep the heartburn because it was really severe. My knee got better where I'd torn an ACL playing sports. It hurt every day, and I would take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen 2 or 3 times a day. It was just standard. I didn't have to do that anymore. Lots of things got better. And at that point, I thought, well, that's really weird, because I hadn't looked into any of the biochemistry and cell and molecular and looked the next level deeper. And so I started recommending, and then patients obviously would see me and be like, oh my God, doc, you look great. What are you doing? And I would be like, well, and I would tell them about keto, but I didn't recommend it. I would recommend it if somebody had a BMI above 33, so severely obese, or if somebody's A1C was 9 or 10 or 11, I'd be like, you need to look at this. And I would couched it as a 3 to 6 months, kind of get you back on track. I looked at it as a weight loss hack, a diabetes hack, short term. I don't know if it's safe to do long term. I don't know. And so then patients would start to come back. And invariably, I would see this very large signal from them, because previously these same patients, their A1C was going up 2 or 3 tenths of a point every 3 to 6 months. They were gaining 3 to 10 pounds every 3 to 6 months. Now, all of a sudden, they were consistently, their A1C went down, and consistently they lost weight. And they also loved the diet, and they loved that they didn't have to portion control or count calories or stop eating when they were still hungry. They loved the diet, and so they actually stuck to the diet better than the ADA diets or any of the other kind of semi-starvation calorie restriction diets. And so, but then, Dave, they started saying, my shoulder arthritis is a lot better. Does this diet help with that? And then literally I would be like, I don't think so. It's just probably coincidental. But I kept hearing pattern after pattern. And I had one guy that he was so overweight that he could not weigh at the office. And our scale went up to 550 pounds. He had to go to the co-op and weigh on the feed scale. And so he would go to the co-op and weigh, and then he weighed over 600 pounds. And he wanted to try it. And I'm like, yeah, let's give it a shot and see. And so that time he came in, he was walking on 2 canes. And he had an orthopedic surgeon in the next town over. He was going to have both knees replaced, bone-on-bone arthritis. 3 months he came back, he was walking with 1 cane. He said, my knees feel a lot better. You think I need to do that? And I'm like, well, yeah, they're bone on bone. Because I had x-ray in my office, unlike most family docs, because I was an x-ray tech and had already seen tens of thousands of x-rays. So if I interpreted my own x-rays, which is legal in Tennessee. I don't know about other states. And so I had seen his knees with my own eyes. I hadn't read a radiology report. I saw his x-rays. And I'm like, God, dude, your knees look pretty rough. I don't know. He comes back 3 months later. He doesn't have a cane. He's walking without a cane, and he's able to weigh on my scales. He didn't have to go to the co-op. He said, I've lost so much weight. I thought I'd come try your scales first. And sure enough, we could weigh him. And he was walking with no canes. And at that point, after so many of these types of patients, I'm like, there's more to this than just weight loss. There's more to this than just reversing diabetes. This is doing something to the biochemistry, the cell, the molecular biology. This is doing something else. And that's when I really just went nuts and just dove in as deep as I could go, trying to figure out what is this diet doing to human physiology that no other diet that I'd ever recommended was doing, that was giving me such a large signal. And that's very important, especially in primary care. If there's a new drug that comes out and you prescribe it to 20 or 30 people, when they come back for the refills, you always ask, well, how's it going? Do you feel like this is helping? And then you get signal or you don't get signal. And that's how doctors decide, yeah, I like this medicine versus this medicine, is the signal our patients give us. We, of course, read the studies and, okay, this is supposed to be 10% better. But the reality is you listen to your patients. And if they're like, yeah, my blood pressure is so much better on this blood pressure pill. Okay, and that when I've heard that from 20 or 30 patients, I'm like, okay, that's the one I'm going to prescribe because I'm getting a big signal back. I was getting more signal back from this diet than I was getting from prescription medication, which the way I was trained, that's not supposed to be possible.
But you also have this other commonality that I'm sure you get from your colleagues, where it's a modern phenomenon, where doctors will say, yeah, but patients want a pill. It's really difficult to talk patients into a lifestyle change.
Right.
And oftentimes it feels, being on the outside, listening to doctors talk about it this way, not all doctors, but some doctors, it feels like they've already made that call. Like they've already come to the conclusion that patients in general like that solution so much so that it's probably just a lot of inefficiency to try to push towards a lifestyle and diet change in the first place. Never mind even what that diet is yet.
And I believed that early in my career. I thought that talking too long about diet was a waste of time and foolish. But that's because of the kind of diets that I'd been recommending.
Right.
Because the other signal I got from this diet was not only did people come back, they were still on it. Because I would ask them about that ADA diet, and they'd be like, can you not just prescribe me something else? And so for a diet that sucks and also doesn't work, yeah, they'd rather have a pill. Go figure, right?
But it's so key to catch what could be confused here. Because if that's the diet, and you're like, here, have more of these things, and they're like, I just can't do it. Either the diet isn't that great, or they aren't that compliant. If you're already starting from the mindset that it's probably just that they're not willing to do it, they keep wanting to eat the bad food instead of the diet that we know is the best diet because the ADA are the experts.
Right.
They're recommending this.
And I think the little tweak that broke me free to be able to kind of step back and see what was going on circumspectly is because it what happened to me, right? And so I had that anecdote, and then the first few severe diabetics and severely obese patients all responded, and they all loved the diet. And then the next signal I got back was their spouse would come in and say, he's doing so good on this diet. I was wondering, could I do this diet too? I had people coming in requesting to be put on keto. I'd never had a single person come in and say, hey, could you put me on Weight Watchers? Or could you put me on the ADA diet? Or they were coming in asking permission, please let me do keto. And I'm like, sure, you sure can. Yes, because at that point I had gotten so much signal from so many different body systems, not just endocrine, not just weight, not just musculoskeletal. I was getting women with PCOS who were also severely obese. They, after 6, 9, 12 months on keto, they were having normal periods again, right? And so you can just imagine me trying to drink from this fire hose of physiology and molecular biology, trying to figure out how is this diet doing this. And it literally every month there would be a new case that came in with a new thing that had gotten significantly better. eating a ketogenic diet that I had never considered before. Dermatological stuff just got crazy better. I mentioned the gynecological got better. It just kept going and going. Blood pressures just routinely kept getting better and better and better.
Joint pain, you mentioned
joint
earlier,
pain, yeah, joint pain.
common.
And so the guy that initially was walking with 2 canes, then 1 cane, then no canes, called his orthopedic surgeon and canceled the knee replacements. And
Wow.
to this day, he still hasn't had his knees replaced.
Wow.
And I saw his bone-on-bone osteoarthritis.
Well, given the weight he had, I mean.
Of course. And so then I was still thinking like an allopathic physician. Well, he weighed 600 pounds. Of course his knees were shot, right? But then I started getting cases of thumb arthritis that was so severe that they would let me inject their thumb, which is exquisitely painful. Shoulder arthritis, that they would come in every 3 to 6 months for a shoulder injection. Clockwork. They started reporting that their arthritis was significantly better. Now, for those of you who are not doctors, thumbs and shoulders are not weight-bearing joints. You don't walk on those. So I couldn't blame, you're just so fat that your thumb is shot. That doesn't make any sense, right? And so it's doing something in the joint, at the cartilage level, at the inflammatory level. There's something going on at the microscopic or even smaller level. It's not just the weight they're losing. That's not it. There's something else, because all these other joints are getting better. You see, it was a dilemma, because I'm like, this diet's doing something. I have no idea. I was searching the literature, and back then I didn't know. I need to look back to the 1800s and the 1700s and the 1600s for the doctors who had discovered this multiple times through the centuries and the decades. I didn't know to look that far back. I was reading the literature trying to figure out what is going on, and nobody was talking about it at an academic level. Now, at the podcast level and the book level and the blog post level, oh man, they were talking about it left and right. But at the academic publication level, at the textbook level, I couldn't find anybody who gave me any kind of explanation as to why this was happening to my patients.
So at what point did you decide you wanted to go wider? Because you can't scale being inside just your family practice.
Correct.
What point did you decide, I want to start making content, get this out to more people?
I didn't decide that. My wife decided that for me. She saw the improvement in me, and then she had multiple friends. We had people who worked at the clinic as receptionists who were doing keto and just getting crazy results. Friends of ours that we had dinner with, that we knew in the community, crazy results. And it was so consistent, unlike, any other diet or most prescription medications. We've got a set of prescription medications now that do that same consistent thing, and that's why they're so popular. But back then, there was no drug that did this consistently, without side effects, without addiction. There was just no drug like that. And she said, you should start a YouTube channel. And I said, you are crazy. I was a little bit arrogant. I'm like, I'm a doctor. What are you talking about? Start a YouTube channel. What? And so she's like, okay, all right. Valid point. And a few months later, I came home from the clinic, and she said, how many people did you help today? And I said, I don't know, 30, 35. She said, wouldn't it have been awesome if you could have helped 35,000 people today? Now, a good husband knows when to keep his mouth shut. And he also knows when to admit that his wife is right.
Amen.
And I said, nah, valid point. And so I started watching YouTube videos about how to start a YouTube channel. And I've watched probably 200 hours, because when I get focused on something, I just kind of engulf the entire field. And so watched hundreds of hours about how to start a channel, how to, do all the little bells and whistles to make it do good. And then I would at lunch or before clinic started, I would go upstairs at the clinic and sit down at my desk, and I would pretend like I was talking to a patient, just face to face, just like this. and be like, okay, so you've got high blood pressure. Here's what we're going to do about it. And I would just put that video out there. And it kind of got pretty popular pretty quickly. And she was quickly proven right, which I'm happy to say she was right. It doesn't hurt my ego at all. And so that's kind of how it started. And one of the very first videos we did, we were sitting at a movie theater in our car waiting for the theater to open. And she said, we should go live on Facebook right now. And I'm like, it's hard to explain without sounding like an arrogant asshole as a doctor, just to be like, what do you mean go live on Facebook? What? And she's like, yeah, we could talk. Remember you were saying that about bread and how, the bread and stuff. We could just talk about that. And so we go live in her car in Paris, Tennessee, waiting for the movie theater to open. And it gets like 40,000 views. And people like, yes, I've been doing this. This is working for me. And just that same signal I'd been getting from all my patients, I started getting it from tens of thousands of people I'd never met saying, yep, same for me. Yes, same for me. And some of my videos, when I first made them, all the comments were like, you're nuts. You're going to kill people. This is not going to work. But then I would notice those same people would come back 6 or 9 months later and say, I was sorry about that comment. I wish I could delete it. You were right. I'm doing it now, and it's done what you said it would do. And I don't know, it's a good feeling in your heart to know that right now somebody that I've never met is watching a video that could transform their health just by making a few simple, easy little changes in the kitchen. They could completely eradicate a chronic disease that they thought was permanent, or they could improve the severity of a chronic condition that they thought was just going to keep getting worse forever. Never met them, we'll probably never meet them, but they're out there right now watching that video going, this sounds crazy, but I guess I'll give it a try. Nothing else has worked.
You have, around this time, I believe, started on a book which has a provocative title.
Yes.
What's that title?
So the book is Lies My Doctor Told Me. And initially, it was self-published. I published it myself. Another 200 hours of watching videos and reading books about how to publish a book to be able to do that. But I'd always noticed that there were things that my professors would say, like eat pasta for type 1 diabetes. That was like, I mean, okay, you're the professor, but that's weird. And remember, I was an X-ray tech. So I'd had some kind of paramedical experience in the ER and on the hospital wards. And so my senior year of med school, I took a radiology class because for a minute I wanted to be a radiologist, because back before Medicaid, radiologists made bank. Okay, they got very well remunerated. And also I was an X-ray tech, so I'd work with radiologists, so it looked like a really cool job. So I thought, okay, I'll check into that. So I took this radiology course my 4th year, and the professor throws up an X-ray and he says, now you can see this patient has a partially collapsed left lung. And I was in the back of the room because all my life I've been a back of the room kind of student. I don't know what that says psychologically. Yeah, you too? Yeah. And so I raised my hand and I said, well, it's probably from those 3 fractured ribs. And if you don't know about X-rays, rib fractures are very, very hard to diagnose on a plain film. CAT scan MRI is super easy to see a rib fracture, but on an X-ray, you almost have to, remember the old posters that if you did your vision just right, it became 3D? You can do that as an X-ray tech, and as a radiologist, you can do that same trick, and you can separate the lung from the ribs and almost see 3D almost. And I was so proud of myself, Nick Norwitz, for seeing those 3 rib fractures. The professor, however, was not in any way pleased with what I had said, because evidently he had not seen the 3 rib fractures that led to the pneumothorax. I guess he thought it was spontaneous, which it can happen, but it's pretty rare. And so for the rest of that course, I was not appreciated by the professor at all. And so that kind of gave me just a little bit of a Wizard of Oz behind the curtain look at, oh, these guys are just, you've heard me say, dudes and chicks. They're just regular folks. They don't know everything. They're not demigods. But coming from that tiny, small town, watching Trapper John and MASH, I thought these were demigods. These are some kind of other kind of human. But the more I interacted with doctors, the more I realized now they're just dudes and chicks just like us. And so I kept noticing things. And the first lie, I was on my obstetrics rotation. And so you're on call for 24 hours, delivering babies, nonstop at the Med in Memphis, Tennessee. The next morning, and now keep this in mind if any of you guys have kids or grandkids that are going to be circumcised, after we'd been on call delivering babies all night, the next morning is when we circumcised the boys. Just for full disclosure. Right, so we had 30 minutes sleep and we're about to do minor surgery on penises. Yes, that's exactly how it was done, okay? And so the vaginal deliveries were discharged after 24 hours. And so if they were going to be exclusively breastfed, my chief for the rotation said we write them vitamin D drops to give the babies because, and I'm like, why? What do you mean? If they're exclusively breastfed, you have to give them vitamin D drops? And he's like, yeah, dummy. Human females don't have vitamin D in their breast milk. Literally. And this guy was double boarded, med peds, so very smart, right? He said that out loud. And I'm like, common sense, all that stuff, right? I'm like, okay, humans would be extinct if that were true because all babies used to be breastfed without exception, right? There was no baby that wasn't breastfed that lived to reproduce, but we don't have vitamin D in our breast milk. And that was the first one. I'm like, I'm busy right now. I don't have time to look into that, but that sounds like some bullshit. And so I filed that away. And so I had maybe 10 that I had filed away like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we can talk about what the resolution of that was after I was in practice for a year and I actually looked into that. I can tell you what happened if you would like. But I just kept collecting these things. It's like, that makes no sense at all. And eventually I had 20 or 30 of them. And I thought, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book about this because this is ridiculous. Especially when I started looking into each one of them and realized, oh, that's not right at all, actually. That's complete lunacy that one of the smartest guys I ever did a rotation with said to me with a straight face, and probably still to this day, wherever he's practicing, he probably still believes that in his heart of hearts and in his intellectual mind, that human Homo sapien sapien does not produce vitamin D in the breast milk. And so that's where the book came from, just things like that I collected through the years of med school residency and then early practice.
Since we are a long-form podcast, go ahead, tell us the story.
Okay.
What happened a year later?
So the vitamin D in breast milk.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd forgotten about that. And then maybe 1 or 2 years into my practice, I was like, oh yeah, I remember that vitamin D thing. And so I started looking into it. And there's actually a researcher in the Carolinas who had done a study about this because she also thought that sounded like bullshit. And obviously, modern humans don't get nearly as much sun as we used to get. And so she supplemented all the moms with 6,000 IUs of vitamin D3. And they took that, and after a month of taking that, she tested their vitamin D25 level, but then she also checked their breast milk. And guess what? Guess what was in copious supply in their breast milk? Vitamin D. So yeah, when humans are in their natural environment, and that's you can kind of see the foreshadowing of the book I'm working on now. When we're in our natural environment, when we're not in this zoo that we call modern society, right? When we're in our natural environment, playing in the sun, out in nature, this body, yeah, it works, and it works almost flawlessly. And chronic diseases are almost unheard of. And yes, moms put plenty of vitamin D in their breast milk if they're getting plenty of sunlight and eating vitamin D-rich foods. Yes, they make plenty of vitamin D. You do not have to give the poor little exclusively breastfed infants the nasty tasting vitamin D drops.
So I would have to imagine you as a doctor publishing that book.
Yeah.
You're getting looked at differently by your colleagues.
Yes, quite a bit. And now keep in mind, this is a small town boy who went to a junior college and then went to MTSU, Middle Tennessee State, state college, not Harvard, right? Sorry, I love you. Having all these big opinions. So not only did it not sit well with my colleagues, it didn't sit well at all with my colleagues. Because basically, all that self-doubt that I'd had as a small redneck from Hornwall, Tennessee, it was all reflected back on me when I published this book and said, basically, a lot of stuff doctors say is either not based in any meaningful research or makes no sense from a physiology standpoint, or is abjectly disprovable with just simple research studies. That got a lot of blowback from not only my colleagues that I work with locally, but colleagues from Memphis, Nashville, Jackson, Tennessee, one of the larger towns, and the Tennessee Medical Board. Yeah, a lot of people had a problem with my book.
So the book literally had an impact on your practice.
Yes. And the patients loved the book, and lots of people loved the book, but my colleagues didn't really love the book just because of the implication of the title. And when I later got it published by a publisher, they really wanted me to tone down the title, and I said, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it just like that. And yeah, I got quite a bit of resistance from several sources.
So I realize there's a lot that happens from the point that you become a content creator all the way up to a particular decision that you made to go ahead and make a competitor to the ADA. But we got to talk about this because I can just share a personal side. Diabetes is the major disease of my family. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this room. Yes, that's, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I run into, Ken, is I already have a giant mountain that I'm facing, that I'm trying to climb. There's plenty there.
Yeah.
So, as you know, I try to be judicious and not get too involved in any other controversies that are out there. But my family and a lot of my friends, they're a spectrum. Some of them are all in now on keto, low carb. Of course, it makes sense. Gosh, thank goodness, Dave, you got into this. Then there's this other end of the spectrum. I like to say they're the challenge cases. And the battle isn't just about knowledge. It's about a sense of permission. Because I think that there just is a lot of battling with food addiction. And what I don't love is when I feel like there's an institution on high that seems to be enabling it. That's been a bit of my issue, particularly with materials that were released, I want to say it was 2 years ago. I felt like I'd made a lot of strides with some key people in my circles. And then there were new materials in this new plate that was released where it said, hey, it's okay. Half of the plate should be, I think it's non-starchy vegetables. 1/4 of it should be a lean protein. And then 1/4 of it should be your favorite healthy carbohydrate. Right? And then they gave a whole bunch of different samples. And I had a real difficult time because not only was I feeling anger because I was getting messages back from some of the family members that were saying, okay, Dave, you've got to start listening to the experts.
Right.
I know you're into this keto world and the cholesterol part of it and so forth. That's fine. But these are the best of the best, and they're the ones who are putting together these guidelines. And I was thankful because I took the time to stop and look back to the founders of the American Diabetes Association. Look back, right? Got founded by, I want to say it was 20 doctors, but there were 4 pioneers, and one of them was like the biggest, most vocal. And you could look at the material that he was releasing that day, what he published, and it was pretty close to what would be a modern low-carb diet today. Not perfect, but surprisingly close.
So it would definitely qualify as low carb, not keto, but it was low carb.
Yeah,
yes,
low carb.
Absolutely.
And so I was in the middle of the study, the research, and I just am pretty good about not jumping on Twitter and complaining like crazy, but couldn't help myself. I slipped a little bit. I did a bunch of this. And then I find out that there's actually some movement within low carb to be like, how about actual low carb? How about an actual institution that's going to codify? How about making that plate all low carb, including that last quarter? I hear about the American Diabetes Society.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, so it's an idea I'd had for a few years. And I talked to Nisha about it. And unlike the YouTube idea, which she was 100% for, she was 100% against the ADS idea, because that sounded like that was a mountain. It was an obvious mountain, a humongous mountain that was going to have to be climbed. And it was going to have to be climbed with lots and lots of hours and with no pay. And she's like, dude, you're busy. You got a wife, 2 kids, a clinic, you writing stuff, you're a content creator.
Even the book pays.
Right.
And you're going to get a lot more heat from the ADS creation than the book.
And so I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let it go, for very much the same reason that you sometimes lost your nerve on Twitter and said something that you then were like, I shouldn't have said that. Because the ADA is causing literal harm, the exact opposite of what doctors are supposed to do, right? It's provable harm that they're causing, but since they're such a big organization and they're so well connected, there's no repercussions from that. And
I want so badly for an RCT, their plate versus ours.
100%.
And we keep the other 2 aspects of their plate the same.
Yep.
And you know what, for that last quarter, have a fatty meat.
Bacon.
Don't even do lean protein.
Yes.
Do fatty protein.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I would kill to have that RCT.
100%.
I'm on my own mountain right now.
But I've been told by an endocrinologist at Harvard that that's $5 to $6 million to do that study. And of course, the ADS doesn't have that kind of money, and we're raising some money, but we don't have that kind of money. But I reached out to a few of the doctors I respected most in the low carb keto community and said, hey, I've got this idea. I know it's a big ask, but would you consider being on the board if I found this nonprofit? And without exception, they said, yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And so we got a great board together. We filed the articles. We got everything done. And now it's completely done. It's a real nonprofit now, and taking donations, and we're working on getting some programs together to start actually broadcasting to people. Hey, there's another alternative. You don't have to just do what the ADA says and get progressively worse. You can actually reverse your type 2 diabetes completely. And if you're a type 1, you can actually have a normal A1C and use 80% less insulin. And people even though we don't have the budget to really advertise and put it out, steady growth in not only donations, but in people saying, hey, I want to start a chapter in my town. I want to help you. Can I volunteer? Overwhelming outpouring of support, of let me volunteer, of where do I donate? And I think it's just a testament to people feel like they've been wronged. They feel like they've been not only mistreated, but just ignored and just shooed away. Like, oh, you're a type 2 diabetic. Of course it's going to get worse. What are you talking about? And so I think we got big plans at the ADS. And once we're able to raise enough money to actually implement those plans, I think it's quickly going to snowball into something that cannot be ignored.
I'm hoping for it so strongly. And fun fact, for those of you who didn't already know this, you're hosting a showing of the cholesterol code, which I'm so excited to say got turned into a fundraiser for the ADS.
Yes.
Which is one of the things you can do with these showings, is you can turn into a charity fundraising event.
Yep.
So the best of all worlds.
Absolutely. That'll be in Dixon, Tennessee.
And I'm coming.
Yeah, Dave will be there, and the nurse practitioner who set it all up said, I really want to donate any profits to the American Diabetes Society. And so very appreciative of that. And, you can buy tickets even if you think you probably can't attend.
We ready to take some questions?
Yeah, let's do some questions.
All right, we're getting our question microphone on the move right now, but I have to say your story is not only compelling, but one of the things that I've always appreciated is, and I hear all the time, is that, I say this with love in my heart, there are a lot of doctors online. There are a lot of doctors who make YouTube videos. You make so many connections. People feel like they know you, that they could have a conversation with you in a restaurant. And that's important for care providers.
Yep.
So I'm glad you came to YouTube.
I think it's because I'm just talking to a patient when I'm making a video. That's how I started, and that's how I still do it. And I think that comes through on the other end.
All right. Raise your hand if you've got a question. Oh, we got one back there. If that one's not working, we could try.
I can speak up. Oh, hi. Okay. Thank you both for this. I'm a big fan of both of your work. I've been following you, Dave, since something like 2013 or 14, like back in the way back when your website was like a page. And I was like, LMHR, what? That's what my husband is. So anyway, and thank you, Dr. Berry, for all your work. I am going to throw a challenge question out there, though. So a lot of people have been keto now for a while, and there is a certain subset that have started to say, hey, I've been keto for so long, but my insulin's really way down, and my hemoglobin A1C is starting to creep up, and my fasting blood sugar is starting to creep up. And there's some talk about, insulin suppression, if you will, with long-term ketogenic diets. People have been doing it for a long time. And some people are, especially from the carnivore community, as you know, kind of jumping ship and like, I'm adding carbs back and I feel better than ever. And I lost a couple extra pounds, and that's kind of been happening. And I kind of don't understand how that's even possible, honestly, or how the CGM data makes sense when that happens. But I do want you to speak to that whole idea of, having spent so much time with insulin levels that are super low, and your body's just not used to producing it. And yes, there's the whole issue of, the blood platelets might be living longer, and that's why the A1C goes up. But when the the fasting blood sugar starts going up, I guess just give us some information on your thoughts on this whole dynamic that seems to be hot and heavy in the last 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, I actually have been trying to follow this very, very closely, but I can't find this subset of people. I hear about them, and I do notice that when someone's on a zero carb carnivore, that their blood sugar will often be a little higher than you would expect for it to be. But that's not really that surprising. Since they're not ingesting any carbohydrates, I would expect them to make as many carbohydrates as their body needs in the form of glucose. And then also you mentioned it's very possible that in carnivores, the A1C is falsely elevated. And almost without exception, first of all, I see A1Cs that maybe go to 5.7, 5.8, somewhere in there. But invariably, we used to check glycated albumins, and they were always normal, which would imply that's a false elevation. I don't think you can even get a glycated albumin anymore. I think LabCorp Quest stopped even offering it. So now we have to use fructosamines, which doesn't check fructose glycation. It still checks for glucose glycation. and they're invariably normal in these people. I've heard this subset painted as their triglycerides are going up, their blood sugar's going up, their A1C is going up, but I have not seen that at all. I do see glucoses that are a little higher than you'd expect, A1Cs that are a little higher than you would expect, but then a glucosamine that says, a fructosamine that says, no, that's a false elevation. And then now let's talk about insulin suppression. I can't think of any physiological pathway where that would happen, first of all. Secondly, all of these people that are supposedly insulin suppressed, their insulin is like 2, 2.5, 3. That's normal. That's not suppressed.
With fat adapted, yeah.
That's a normal insulin. And then also, if you give them a carbohydrate challenge, their insulin it elevates exactly like you would suspect it to. So part of the reason keto and now carnivore got so popular, I hope that 70 or 80% of that is because it helps people and it works. But about 20 or 30% of that is the popularity train. People are like, oh, wow, keto, that's really popular. I'm going to try that. Oh, carnivore, yeah, I'm going to try that. And also doctors who are trying to make a name for themselves see that. And like, I should make more keto videos. I should make more carnivore videos. But then also, you become much more of an expert if you find some problem that's just so hard to understand that, I don't know, you probably need to become my patient or buy my course or buy my supplements or whatever. I don't think it's physiologically possible to feed somebody low carb enough long enough to cause insulin suppression. That is, the way I understand the physiology, that's not even possible because they're going to have an insulin rebound the instant you challenge them with carbohydrates. So I don't understand the point.
I myself actually have a strong opinion on this, and I want to apologize to Nick Norwitz, who's probably heard this at least 100 times. He's joining us in the audience, by the way. That's why we keep making reference to our good friend here. I very respectfully challenge the narrative. The nature of the narrative is this. Suppression sounds like type 1 diabetes. It sounds like insufficiency. That's what type 1 diabetes is. You insufficiently provide enough insulin to control your glucose levels. That is the nature of diabetes. It's a dysregulation of glucose in the bloodstream. So what happens when we throw a CGM on these same people we're talking about? It's flat, right? If these are the ones where I believe we're talking about, it's the people who have consistently low insulin that seems to be effective at maintaining what looks to me like homeostasis. Having your glucose levels that consistent throughout the day, you never see in any other populations. You have to be both fat adapted and very metabolically healthy to achieve that thing that's happening. Now, I'll be upfront and say, it's possible, it's pathological. It's just, in order for me to feel confident it is, there's two things I'm looking for. One, I want to see if it's progressively getting worse. So I've been upfront publicly, including on my podcast, that my own A1C, when I'm militantly keto, tends to bounce between 5.5 to 5.9. Sounds terrible. That's like pre-diabetic. But then I go and I test my insulin, and it hovers between 3 to 5 milli-IU, right? Consistently, you throw a CGM on me, it's flat, right? Now, do I think if I maintained militant keto indefinitely, that I think my A1C is going to keep creeping up? No. What about my fasting glucose? Again, I've been upfront with the public that my fasting glucose is often in the 90s when I'm militantly keto.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I think is going on? I think it's actually an Occam's razor. I think that when I'm fat adapted, my cells have more fatty acids in them. Because of that, because of the Randall cycle, there's going to be less expression of GLUT4, and therefore, in the aggregate, my tissue throughout my periphery is just taking up less glucose. And it only needs a slight difference of how much it's taking up to mean that there's more spared out, which makes sense because there are obligate cells
Yep.
there are red blood cells that do need glucose. And okay, it doesn't mean that it just progressively gets higher and higher and higher, right?
Which I've never seen, and I don't think any of the people who claim to have diagnosed insulin suppression, I don't even think they claim that the A1C and glucose continues to rise. It just gets a little higher than they're comfortable with. And another concept that kind of helps with this is the normal distribution curve. It's normal for some people to have a fasting glucose of 65, completely normal. It's also completely normal for some people to have a fasting glucose of 90. That's normal, okay? And it's normal for that person. Not everybody's going to have a glucose of 65. Not everybody's going to have an A1C of 4.9. There's a normal distribution curve of physiological distribution. So I think that the people who are talking about insulin suppression, I think they mean well, but I don't think this is a real thing that's worth worrying about.
And as always, have a study on it.
But I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Right.
100% happy to be proven wrong.
And to capitalize on one other thing you said, I absolutely do and hear anecdotes in the Lean Mass Hyperresponder Facebook group all the time of some number of people who say, hey, I've reintroduced carbs. And there's multiple reasons they may do it, to lower their LDL, or because they're hearing about the insulin suppression and they metabolize them well. And they're like, oh, you know what, actually, I like this more. And I've helped to resolve this number I'm concerned about. And therefore, I feel better all around. Good for that person.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great, right?
Yep.
Most of the people that I know who are militantly keto, who are carnivore, and for the long haul, they usually have a medical reason to do it, or they have a behavioral one. There are some people that's like, that's just the way that I'll succeed at keeping my weight down and that I don't get, hung up. There's a lot of people who have, carboholism, if you will.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just what it takes.
One more final point. I'm working on a book right now called In Search of the Proper Human Diet. And one of the things that is part of a proper human diet, it's not one diet. And I think some of the insulin suppression crowd think I'm going to be offended by them adding back in some carbs, when in reality, I don't give a damn. Because a proper human diet is a spectrum that ranges from carnivore, 0 carb, to therapeutic keto, to just keto, to low carb. In my opinion, remember the normal distribution curve, some people need to be carnivore, and I'm one of those people. I could gain 20 pounds like that on keto. But as long as I stay carnivore, I stay about right here. There's a normal distribution curve. Some people can do low carb, under 100 total grams, and do great. And so I think that maybe that population, they're like, I'm going to add back in some carbs. Oh man, I'm feeling great. Huzzah. I'm not a carnivore doctor. I'm a proper human diet doctor, and if that means you're eating 0 carb or you're eating under 100 carbs, you and I are friends, and you're on my Christmas card list. But now if you start trying to say that any human on planet Earth needs more than 100 grams of total carbs a day, I'm taking your name off the Christmas card list, okay? But yeah, if you added back in some carbs and you feel better, huzzah, I'm fine with that. I'm not a carnivore doctor. I personally am carnivore, but I don't think all you guys need to be carnivore.
Next question.
Hi. First, thank you for all you do. I'm a hot fan. So you brought up the thing with being that friend, talking to the friend, being straight about the advice they need. I'm good with helping people. I help plenty of people, but I'm really, really bad at being that friend or at talking to that loved one. I don't find the right words. Like, what's your advice on that one?
Well, of course, we're all naturally starting from a place of being pleasers, right? We don't want to hurt people's feelings. Nick shakes his head. However, there's the recognition of there being a problem with somebody you care about. I just got done talking about my challenge cases that I was discussing. And one of the issues is that some of those challenge cases, they're pretty far along. They're close to the edge. And it's difficult because when I'm coming to, like, say, family gatherings and so forth, they get conscious of me being there. And it's such a stigmatizing feeling. I don't want to be the carb police, right? Have any of you guys ever felt like you were the carb police to your family? Something like that?
When I walk into a room, people hide their plates.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, I really don't care. I don't care. It's free choice, whatever
Yeah.
you want to do. Yeah.
But if you're somebody in my life and I love you and I care about you, then and this is what I'll say. This is my stock speech. I go, I would like to just be able to tell you this and then just leave it with you, right? So you know that I'm not going to keep hounding you over and over. But it is something that I'd like to be able to tell you as someone who loves you. Because this is what I usually say as a qualifier. The people I don't love, I don't need to have those conversations with them. If you're a stranger on the street, I don't need to proselytize to you on what I'm seeing are the problems with your health, right? Well, okay.
Go ahead.
No,
Is this a loved one that you're, yeah? Yeah, okay. So what if they were a drug addict? Would you keep silent? Because some people would. Many people do.
Right.
They know that dad's an alcoholic, or they know that mom's taking way too many nerve pills, and they just choose to just not acknowledge it.
It's their business.
That's their business, right? That's one of many rational decisions you can make. And in my opinion, somebody who's a carboholic, a sugar addict, it's obviously damaging their health, that's just as dangerous as a drug addiction. And so, but we're all different personality styles. Now, I can't imagine, Roxana, that you have trouble being confrontational with somebody, but I believe you. I trust you if you say that, because it's different if it's your family, right? Yeah, gotcha. But if you're like, yeah, if they were an alcoholic, I probably wouldn't say anything either. I wouldn't want to step on their toes. That's a lot of people in family dynamics make that decision every single day. So in the end, you've got to decide, do I truly believe this is going to destroy their health and take them from me prematurely? Do I love them enough to have that uncomfortable conversation, and maybe multiple uncomfortable conversations? And if the answer is no, that's fine. But if the answer is, nah, I've got to do something, then you got some thinking to do.
Next question.
So this is a question about some of the medical stuff. So when I went keto, my blood pressure dropped a lot, but then it's been slowly creeping back up. Is that something you see frequently, and what's the likely causes?
I do see it. What else has been happening over the years that you've been keto?
Well, I have tried various experiments with Mediterranean and other things. So I've added back a little bit more carbs, but it's...
So you've added back more carbs in your blood pressure.
But I've also gone back to very strict keto, and it stays where it's at.
Yeah, no, I understood. But the other thing that you've been doing over these years is you've been getting older.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And so on average, blood pressure tends to go up as you get older. On average, you tend to become more insulin resistant. I hate that term so much, but it kind of fits, and right? As you get older, you tend to lose muscle. On average, your bones tend to get more brittle. On average, as you're getting older, you tend to get older.
Well, this is actually only a period of a year that it went back up.
Yeah.
But I did put on more muscle, so if that has an effect.
Maybe. I do see this over the course of 5-10 years, but I don't typically see it over a year or two. I would investigate that a little deeper for perhaps a secondary cause of hypertension, or you might need a new blood pressure monitor. Very often, you got a new one, okay, because sometimes that's the problem.
Do you wear a CGM?
Yeah.
Consider wearing a CGM.
100%. Yeah, I like that idea. And also watch my YouTube video called How Not to Die, and also how to check your blood pressure properly, because the average doctor's office does about 4 things wrong that makes your blood pressure falsely high. Falsely high. It's not truly high. It's falsely high. And so watch that video, and if you're doing 3 or 4 of those things, stop doing those things. You did, you saw it. Okay, beautiful. Yeah. But now then the question becomes, do you have renal artery stenosis, a mild case that's making it creep up? Do you have an adrenal issue? There's several other causes of secondary hypertension that I would investigate with a cardiologist just to make sure you don't have that. What's
So-
your average blood pressure now? Average.
With meds, 115.
And what are you taking right now? 10 milligrams, 5 milligrams. Oh, so very low dose amlodipine.
But it was 110 with nothing.
And
When I first went on keto,
but what was the high number you were worried about?
115 is higher than I like. What was 20?
115 systolic?
So if I do no blood pressure medicines, I'll be at like 125.
And you're worried about that? Okay, next question. Sometimes, so there's actually an ICD-10 code for worried well. That if somebody comes in and they're worried about something and they're actually worried about nothing, there's actually an ICD-10 code we can code in the chart. It's called worried well. Means there's nothing wrong with them. They're just worried about nothing. That's you. I love you. Of course, yeah. And so, yeah, we could definitely go into that if we got time.
So just to complete my thought,
He's normal. He's normal. There's nothing to worry about.
I know. I'm not suggesting CGMs are end-all be-all, but boy, do I love them for just getting a quick categorical check. I don't know how many times I've finally talked to given family member or so forth to finally wear a CGM, and things get discovered that they just didn't know, that they didn't realize was actually a big source of carbohydrates. I cannot wait until we have non-invasive wearables. I believe when an Apple Watch or a Samsung Watch actually can be a CGM, it is going to be a game changer
Absolutely.
for the Western world. It might be why it hasn't happened yet. It's possible, right? But the bottom line is, it's not, again, not that's the end all be all, but I have caught the dumbest leaks that people just didn't know about. One of my family members, for example, loved to get omelets at IHOP. Do you know why omelets at IHOP are a problem?
I absolutely do.
They put pancake batter
yes.
in the omelets.
Yep.
On omelet.
It's not just egg.
Yeah,
Look at her face. She's like, what the?
yeah.
Everything's a lie. Yeah, they put pancake batter because it makes the omelets more fluffy. And obviously it's cheaper than the egg. And you can't really detect it. So yeah, IHOP does that. Denny's used to do it. I don't know if they still do it. You have to ask. Yeah.
And there's a family member who loves to eat keto bread, store-bought keto bread. Just by a heads up, CGM at a minimum, if you're buying things with a package that has keto on the package, just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Absolutely.
okay, we'll go to the next question.
Thank you both for the information and doing this interview. It's awesome. And I actually have a question for both of you, since you keep talking about CGMs, Dave. Dr. Berry, as far as the amount of education on nutrition, and you say 95% plus is based on burn units or whatever, do you see, the pharmaceutical industry pushing back on more education for the doctors because of that getting rid of the drugs? And how receptive in your industry are you seeing doctors wanting more education on the nutrition side of things to help with that versus drugs? And then Dave, the question for you is the CGMs. Do you have a recommendation on a specific one? Because my wife was wearing one and her readings were way off, and then she did the finger pricks and saw it consistent. So that CGM, and I don't know which one you were wearing, but it was way off on her numbers, like 20, 30, 40 points. So that can be misleading too if you don't have the wherewithal to know to try the finger prick test to see what the actual readings are. So both of those questions, whatever one's first.
So there was just an announcement by a representative of the federal government that somehow, I guess with an executive order, they're going to demand that all medical schools start having nutrition education. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but because I don't know if that's how it should be done or not. Number one. Number two, what nutrition are they going to teach in the medical
Yes.
school?
It's the
Now,
question.
I've heard a lot of crybabying on Twitter about, well, they're just going to teach plant-based, but okay, all right. But here's my thought. If they're I don't care if they're teaching Hogwarts nutrition, at least they're teaching nutrition. Not that that is going to be the solution, but these young medical students are going to go, okay, well, nutrition is, I guess, important, or they wouldn't be teaching it in medical school. Does that make you see that? So there's that little human nature tweak of it that I'm actually like, I don't care. I wouldn't care if they started teaching plant-based nutrition at Harvard. That'd be fine. But because what's going to happen is now doctors, they've raised up nutrition in their hierarchy. Like it's important enough. There's a class in medical school, so I should probably pay attention and understand it. But then they're not going to get any signal from that bullshit diet that they were taught when they tell their patients. They're going to get the same exact signal I got from the ADA diet. And there's going to be a significant portion of them who are going to adjust their nutrition advice to their patients as they keep learning more and more about nutrition. So I'm just happy if it's taught in med school. I could care less what brand is taught, because I think if the doctors think it's important, just like they think pharmaceuticals are important. So if there's a new study about calcium channel blockers, they're going to be like, oh, I need to read that because they're important. That's in blood pressure, hypertension. You see how they're going to be like, oh, there's this, I keep hearing these crazy doctors talk about keto, but I was trained that it was plant-based. Let me look into that. That's going to be worthy of their time. Does that make sense? So in that respect, I just want them to talk about nutrition in medical school.
I think your point's well taken, at least with regard to, and I've said this on the podcast several times before, while I know often keto and plant-based get kind of pitted against each other in many respects, I genuinely believe this. I genuinely believe that 80% of what the value is of the new diet that you're adopting is because you've left the standard American diet.
Mm-hmm.
Like that you really could put up a bunch of popular diets, even ones that we hardly talk about, like the DASH diet or the portfolio diet or any of those. You could throw a dart at a dartboard. And if it got you away from the McDonald's and the Taco Bell and all of that stuff, you're probably into a better way. So I agree, at least having something and at least putting it on the radar is such a huge improvement.
Exactly.
So again, I would agree. I would take it that way. As far as CGMs, I can't speak as much to brands now because I haven't worn one recently. It is actually something I'm looking to do coming into the summer once I have a little more time. I wouldn't be too scared off from how far off the blood markers are. Anticipate that you're still going to do finger pricks and that you're going to be calibrating against it, especially if it's the new over-the-counter version, right? You're wanting to watch the patterns. Just, to the extent to where you can actually see that things are changing. The calibration shouldn't be off so much that even the relative changes are completely random. It's going to be more to do with the absolute changes to what the baseline is. I think Nick's got a question. Oh, sorry.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on what it is with cardiologists. Because if you have a primary care physician and you have any high LDL at all, they send you to the cardiologist. And, short of interviewing them and asking whether they're familiar with the lipid energy model.
I love it. I love you.
Everyone is going
Do you
to
say that to your cardiologist?
I'm tempted to do that. I will be doing that at my next visit.
I love that.
But I know what the answer is going
That's
to
great.
be.
The cardiologist is like, what the?
It's going to be shut up and take your statin.
100%, yeah.
And are they going to be the last ones to see the light?
Cardiology and endocrinology. Those are going to be the last two to see the light. We're already seeing huge movement in fertility specialists coming on board like crazy. All the primary care docs. They've had so many people who have seen my YouTube videos go in and ask them for a fasting insulin and I'm doing keto that they're like, what the hell? I need to look into this. And so now a ton of them are on board. Orthopedic any surgeon, because wound infection rates go down and wound healing rates go up when you're eating a proper human diet, right? But cardiologists, okay, part of writing in search of the proper human diet is I have had to dive so deep into history and archaeology and paleontology, anthropology, that I have read so much history. Do you know how many scientists and doctors and experts have been put to death through the centuries and the millennia because they believed something that went against the mainstream narrative? Lots of them, okay? And guess what? Here's the kicker. They were right, and the mainstream was wrong. That's happened so many times in human history that it's almost not even interesting. This is just the latest rendition of that, okay? You guys have heard of Semmelweis. You've heard of this guy? He said, doctors, after you've had your hands in mucking around in a dead body, you should wash your hands before you go and deliver babies. That was his hypothesis, that childbed fever would probably not be as bad if you did that. And yeah, of course he was right. He actually published a study. He did a study and published it. And it did not matter. He was completely driven out of medicine. He was ruined completely because doctors were gentlemen. And gentlemen's hands are never dirty, even if they're covered in rotten entrails. How dare you say such a thing? And he was eventually put into an asylum. And in the scuffle to put him in the asylum, he was beat up and got a skin infection, and he probably died of the same exact bacteria that he was trying to protect pregnant women from by getting the doctors to wash their damn hands before they attended a woman's birth. This has happened so many times it's not even news. It's like dog bites man. This is what humans do. Anytime you step outside the mainstream, anytime you go against the mainstream narrative, you're going to get big time kickback. Cardiologists are very protected because they see damage that's been happening over years. They're not like an orthopedic surgeon. He can tell this wound, this person's got an A1C of 12. Their wound still hadn't healed. This guy used to have an A1C of 12. Now his A1C is 5. His wound healed like that. They get immediate feedback like that. Fertility specialists, primary care, they get that signal that I was talking about earlier. Cardiologists, they don't get any signal. All they deal with stuff that happened decades ago, and they do a little tiny intervention, and they think they saved the world. And then also, you have to understand, cardiologists their entire practice is based around reducing the absolute risk from 1.3 to 1.2. There's literally no signal there. Right? If they put everybody in the universe on a statin, there would be no signal. If you called everybody in the world who's on a statin and said, stop your statin right now, there would be no signal at all. There would be no epidemic of heart attacks. And if you put everybody in the world on a statin at gunpoint, there would be no reduction in the rate of heart attacks. They're treating a ghost, but they can't see it. In endocrinology, I don't even know what to say about them. How many have had a bad experience at the endocrinologist? It's like, okay, here's the thing. In med school and in residency, the endocrinologist is the nerd's nerd, right? Like they are the nerd of the nerd. They are so smart. I remember we consulted one on a pediatric type 1, new onset type 1, and I was just like, damn, their brain is like in a different I don't even understand what they just said. But remember how it flips when you get out. They're not the boss. Now they're waiting for referrals. When it comes to thyroid, they suck. When it comes to diabetes, they suck. I don't know what the answer for endocrinology is. And I think they'll be the very last ones to come on board. I'd love Nick's opinion on that, coming from Harvard. I just love saying that.
Well, I have to compliment Ken for his surgical strikes on basically every medical field that is associated with my life. I think he went through surgery, OBGYN, and endocrinology. My girlfriend's a surgeon, my dad's an OB, and I was going to be an endocrinologist. So kudos.
Yeah, nerd. That's it right there. Yeah.
QED. My question, I had a lot of questions, but I'm going to keep it high level. Parallel questions for Ken and Dave serially. I think we could probably agree, intermingled in the epidemics of obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, we have a little bit of a epidemic of mistrust. So my question for Ken is, how do we restore trust in the medical profession? My question for Dave, how do we restore trust in the scientific profession?
So if you're married to a serial cheater, they've cheated on you 10 times, do you forgive them again, and then you trust them again, or do you divorce their ass? Most people eventually say, I'm done, I can't. But does that mean you never trust again? It might be hard, but I think you can trust again and love again, right? With work, with patience, with trying. And so I think some of the organizations today are not salvageable. I think they went too far down the wrong roads for too long, too consistently, and more importantly, far too arrogantly. It's one thing to be wrong, but when you're arrogantly wrong, that's a problem. And that's just like being cheated on and then slapped in the face for bringing it up. That's not ever going to work again. And so that's one of the reasons that we formed the American Diabetes Society, is basically as that old paradigm crumbles, we don't want people to be without a diabetic society. We want that to be a thing. Of course, we live in a modern society. So there needs to be an organization that helps diabetics and teaches them. So as they crumble, because it's obvious at this point that they have no interest in remediation or asking for forgiveness. I said back in 2017, maybe one day the ADA will hold a press conference and say, you know what? We were wrong about all that. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I got tired of waiting, and so that's what the ADS, that's where it is now sitting, waiting for their opportunity to step into the void when the old system crumbles. The Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners is waiting for the American Medical Association to literally disintegrate, and they're going to take over and they're going to train doctors, right? COSI, all the stuff the Bazooki Group is doing, Metabolic Mind, they're going to replace the American Psychological Association. I mean, it's literally, we're just going to raise new institutions up. That's not the same old institution that cheated on you 20 times and then slapped you when you brought it up. Because everybody's tired of that. And I think that's what you were alluding to. We're all sick and tired of being gaslit, but not just gaslit, but then when we bring it up, oh, well, then you get denigrated as well. So yeah, let's have new organizations and let those die a peaceful death. And let's just have organizations that haven't cheated on us and then slapped us when we pointed it out, that actually give good advice and that help people stay healthy. And let's support those organizations and let the others crumble.
I'd only disagree with, I don't think the death is going to be peaceful.
It may not be peaceful, and I'm prepared for that, but I want it to be peaceful, and I'll do everything in my power to keep it peaceful. But if it's not peaceful, I'm like the farmer's duck, Nick.
I like that analogy. Dave, science.
To err is human, right? We're all making mistakes.
Sure.
We all need to be mindful of the mistakes that are made. Where I get ornery is when there's a lack of course correction. When you have been presented the data, when the data continues to come forward. This is why I have my standing complaint with the ADA, right? We've got 100 years. We had it starting off on the right foot. And we now have a low-carb movement that is as robust as it's ever been, particularly for like the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's overflowing data. And yet, what are we seeing pop up in literature, Nick? Constantly, these studies on, quote, low-carb diets. How
Keto
many of
diet
these-
increases risk of.
Keto-like diet, where the keto-like diet's a low-carb diet score that's not actually producing the
Right.
macros, just this skewed. It's the
Yeah.
most obscured.
So this is the thing I'm very fascinated
Because that
with.
looks like ill will to me. That doesn't look like ignorance at that point,
Right.
does it? At some point, that
intentions.
starts to look nefarious, doesn't it? That
Yeah.
starts to look.
The carb skews is like an epidemiological study from like 40% to like 50%.
And
That's the range.
let's say what it is. It's effective. It is effective because that's what CNN carries. That's what MSNBC carries. That's what you see on Fox News. Those things hit the headlines, right? But how many of the new breaking studies compete effectively, get the same airtime, say a metabolic mind study that drops? No, a lot of times. If it's lucky enough to get any headlines, it's already got some standing expert that's going to appear to explain why there's still lots of problems, lots of concerns with the keto diet. I'm still amazed at how many things I hear like it's unsustainable. When I personally have known so many people who have been on this diet since before I knew the word keto, right? So yes, the issue is that we have this problem that the AIR campaign does have a lot of structural strength behind it that's up against us. However, social media has been a godsend for this research that we've been doing with Keto CTA, for pushing forward the ADS, right? So we have to have things backed by science. We have to get it into the literature. We have to have that established so that the data is strong. But then we have things like the cholesterol code documentary that's going to get it out to the masses. It can't just be anecdotes that are unpublished. We need more. We need both. But that's what it's going to take. We have to be the better scientists. That's, Nick, how I believe we get the trust back.
And we also have to be patient, because you and I know this is the proper human diet. And anytime you make a discovery, you just expect everybody else. You're like, what is taking people so long? I don't understand what's going on. Let's go back to Semmelweis. I told you he published a paper, a good paper, that proved that if you wash your dirty hands, childbirth fever drops like 80%. Published it in a reputable journal. How many years did it take from the time he published that until it became mainstream to wash your dirty hands before you care for a woman in labor? Anybody know for a fact how many years it was? Can anybody guess? Guess what? I'm not going to tell you. I want you to go home and look it up. But my point is, this stuff when you're changing a paradigm of a society, that doesn't happen quickly. And this room is full of early adopters. Do you know what that word means? Mavericks and early adopters. That's what every single one of us are. And there's a hierarchy. And it gets down to laggards on the other end, okay? But these changes in society don't happen quickly. So stop expecting that. You need to expect a long slog, decade, 10 to 20 years. I'd say 10 years, because we've got something Semmelweis didn't have. You know what it is? Social media, baby. Social media. He did not have that. It literally died with him in that insane asylum until it was rediscovered decades later. I'll just give you that. But I want you to all go home and read the story of Semmelweis. Then you'll see what I'm talking about. Yes, we have discovered something here. 100%. You are right. It's going to take at least 10 years before this is mainstream. All those things can be true at the same time, unfortunately.
Okay, I'm gonna ask two, but you can pick one. But the first question I think is pretty straightforward. I just haven't had the opportunity to speak to like a keto-informed physician. So first, pretty quick question is, my dad has arterial plaques already. And because I don't understand the mechanism of that formation, I mean, none of us really know, I don't think.
Including cardiologists.
including cardiologists, I'm a little more timid with his health than I would be with mine. You know, he's on statins, he's on blood pressure meds. So I want to throw in the extra bit of butter for him too, but I'm worried about doing that, and his cardiologist won't answer my emails. So can I put the butter in, or
Give your dad some butter and some bacon.
Yeah.
It's fine, okay. What her hesitance? That's love. She loves her dad. She didn't want to kill her dad. Geez, right? But anytime there's been a new discovery like this, it's, you know, washing your hands. There's not a lot of downside to that. Like, okay, yeah, sure, wash your hands, no big deal. But we're saying add something that our entire society has been literally trained will cause a heart attack. And now Dr. Berry's saying it's fine. Give your dad can eat butter. It's fine.
Yeah. So that leads to my second question, which is like the meatier one. Pharmacology. It's like this added variable now that we have to account for because, you know, we never really chose to introduce it. So my question for you as a physician, you know, we see in the metabolic psychiatry world how ketosis and psychotropic meds, that's a whole balancing act. And the tapering process and everything. Yep. As a family physician, family medicine provider, what are the meds you look out for and the sort of dance you have to do with some of them, especially as it pertains to, I'm going to assume deprescribing, but I don't know.
Yeah, and so that's something, if you're a doctor and you recommend low-carb, keto, carnivore diets, deprescribing is something you become very familiar with very quickly. And I had to dig into that because I had never, ever had any training on deprescribing. Not even back then, not even opioids or benzodiazepines. You just kept refilling everything. You didn't stop anything until the OxyContin thing came along. Then everybody's like, oh, maybe we should start weaning a bunch of this stuff down. If a patient's injecting insulin when they start low carb, keto, carnivore, you've got to monitor them and you've got to help them and counsel that could lead to problems. If they're taking some of the oral type 2 diabetic medications that work by forcing the pancreas to secrete more insulin, they can get in trouble. They can have low blood sugar. But if you're injecting insulin, you can have a fatal event, right? If your blood sugar drops to 30 while you're driving on the interstate, that's no bueno. If they're on lots of blood pressure medication, then their blood pressure can start to, I love how people, using your words properly is so important. People will say, well, I started keto and my blood pressure was just dropping so low. No. Your blood pressure was returning to normal. That's what was happening. Let's say it like it is. But if it returns to normal too quickly and you're on too much now inappropriate pharmaceutical, you could pass out, hit your head, have a bleed, bad things, right? Yeah, I've known many people that are on 2 or 3 different blood pressure medications, basically maxed out. They start keto. After a week of keto, their blood pressure is 110/70, and when they stand up, they literally get dizzy and almost pass out. Not at all. This guy with his 5 of amlodipine, no. Because here's the thing, again, blood pressure medications, you remember how I told you that cardiology is effective, they're treating a ghost, basically? The hypertension literature is pretty much the same exact way. His 5 of amlodipine is literally maybe lowering his systolic 1 point, maybe some days, right? It's a ghost. And so for a low dose antihypertensives, it's irrelevant. And there may be a few other, I know in the psychiatry sphere, some of the antipsychotics, you have to really be slow. And obviously the benzodiazepines, you have to be very, very slow and judicious. But statins, you can throw them in the garbage right now. Okay, you could be taking 80 of Lipitor and throw it in the trash. No withdrawals, no change, no nothing. It's almost like nothing happens at all. Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing. If not already doing this, consider consulting with an existing low-carb doctor. because the low carb doctors are going to be used, just like Ken Berry is right here, they're going to be used to this transition. And so adopting a low carb diet and especially getting to the deprescribing, they're going to have a sense of like what drugs should be tapered down, what might be dropped faster than not, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Like the oral diabetic medications, glucophage doesn't work by forcing the pancreas to secrete more insulin. So you're never going to have a hypoglycemic episode if you're on metformin. I've never seen it. I'm sure it's theoretically possible, but it's very, very uncommon. But if you're on glyburide or glimepiride, you can absolutely have a low blood sugar episode. If you go keto, I don't even want to say too aggressively. That makes it sound negative. If you adopt a proper human diet as quickly as you should, you can wind up with a low blood sugar episode because you're now taking inappropriate medication. And the glyburide, glipizide, glimepiride, they can do that, but glucophage doesn't do that. Does that make sense?
I know that should be your next book, is Aggressive Keto.
Aggressive keto.
I would just like to speak a little bit about ketosis. So back in the late 70s, Dr. Atkins was my hero, and I, was able to be in ketosis for quite some time, lose the weight that I needed to. And then, of course, at that time, you were needing to be adding those carbs back in again and try to make your body normal by not being in ketosis all the time. So now, come forward to August of this year, I decided, okay, it worked for me back then, I'm going to try it again. So I went strict carnivore in August, and it's been wonderful. But I have a question about ketosis, because the urine sticks that I have been using, I'm not sure what the difference is between the urine stick ones or the blood. And I've not really heard anybody really talk about that. So if you could just kind of give me a little idea.
So several things there. First of all, if anybody says that being in long-term ketosis is in any way unnatural or dangerous or not safe, my current belief is that's foolishness. I'm actually going to have a researcher from the UK, Dr. Isabella Cooper. She's going to be back on the channel soon, and she's got a new study.
She's awesome.
She's so awesome. But have you read her new study? That
we published with her.
Yeah, long-term keto, 100% safe. Deep ketosis for years, completely safe. Completely natural, in my opinion, okay? Now,
And worth noting, there are long-term epileptics, there are long-term type 1 diabetics who are hardcore.
Yeah, remember I said earlier about how if you make stuff sound complicated, it makes you an expert? Right, okay. So if I just say, look, long-term ketosis is safe, this is not brain science or rocket surgery, you're like, okay, but that doesn't sound very impressive. But if I say, well, now you got to be very careful now with long-term keto, you need to buy my book or whatever, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so I don't think it's a thing, and I'll be talking with Dr. Cooper about that coming up in a few months. Now, the urine strips for ketones, pretty inaccurate, first of all. Blood testing is much more accurate, but have you noticed what I've not been talking about much over the last year? Ketosis. Because if you adopt a proper human diet and stick to it, guess what happens? You don't have to worry about any of that shit. You just eat food and then go outside and play. It's almost like your body knows how to do all this stuff. It doesn't need you pricking or poking or doing any of that. Some of us love it, right? We love the data. We love to have the spreadsheet. And that's fine, but you don't have to do any of that, okay? But I think blood ketones are much more accurate. But another thing I've noticed over the years of doing this is that when you first start keto, your ketones will be much more impressive than after you've been keto for 6, 9, 12, 18 months because you become keto adapted. I had to stop saying fat adapted because you get dinged on social media. It sounds like you're saying you're fat adapted. So I have to say you're keto adapted or I'll get dinged. But you become keto adapted, and so you might be running around with a 0.4 or 0.5. Completely healthy, completely normal, But that guru you followed said, oh, if it's not 1 point whatever, you're not really in ketosis. Eat a stick of butter.
Fun fact, lean mass hyperresponders in our group often have ketone levels, and they complain about it, that are 0.5, 0.4, et cetera. But
Completely healthy and normal.
I would bet anyone in this room a sizable amount of money that you take those same lean mass hyperresponders, you put a RQ on them, and they're going to be blowing very high fat respiration
Yep.
relative
Checking
to
the acetone.
carbohydrate. Yes.
Yeah.
Why? Why? Because the respiration is a stronger metric than the present levels in the blood
Yeah.
or in the urine, because that's capturing what's in transit but not yet in use. Utilization is hard to capture, right? And I like to say this, even though it's not as sexy as ketosis, but technically I'm on a fatty acid diet, right? Fatty acids go multiple directions. They can head in the direction of ketogenesis, but they also can get esterified onto triglycerides, loaded onto a VLDL, and then distributing but that's just not as cool and sexy as keto. Keto sounds awesome.
Yeah.
It's got great
Very
branding.
sciencey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds so cool,
Yeah.
right?
And so that's why I haven't been talking about ketosis, ketones much lately, is because I had this epiphany that if you just eat low carb enough for your personal physiology and with enough healthy animal fat and healthy animal protein, and you do that consistently, everything just does what it's supposed to do. I love ketosis, and I still read about it and think about it, but I don't have to talk about it anymore. Because if you eat low carb enough, that's going to take care of itself. When keto was first back in 2017, this was all new and experimental. We were like, we don't know. Everybody better get a keto meter and check, because who knows what'll happen. I think we know now exactly what's going to happen if you eat a proper human diet that's low carb enough for you personally at this phase of your life, this phase of your metabolic health. All that's going to go back to normal without you tracking it. You can track it if you want to, but you don't have to.
So Dave kind of pointed me for a second. I do a lot of fun little experiments on myself, and I'm part of the LMHR Facebook group. And what I find, one of the things that Dave said early on when he identified the LMHR phenotype was that people who are lean in particular just don't see high ketosis. Their ketones are always like, they're readable, but they're always like 0.5 or under. And that's where I live all the time. In fact, the only time I ever go like higher is with extended fasting. It has to be over 24 hours fasted. Then I'll see my ketones go up because I'm actually freeing up fat stores. And the other time, Dave, I did that fat bomb experiment the other day. So I ate 2 keto bricks, which, if for those of you who don't know what those are,
Wow.
Those are each 1,000 calories, 176 grams of fat, 112 of which are saturated fat. So I did a keto brick craft test where I checked labs before, ate 2 keto bricks, which was really tough, and then did labs at 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 and 4 hours, and measured my CGM, finger stick glucose, and ketones during this time. What did I see over that time? I just ate 2 keto bricks. I started out, I think I was like at 0.2 or 0.3 for my ketones. It went up to 1.0.
Yes.
Right after eating this, right? And usually what you would see, right, is ketones drop after a meal because you're having higher insulin, you're having higher glucose, so ketones would usually just drop off the map. But in this case, my glucose stayed flat. I had a mild bump of insulin. It went up. I think I was sitting a little higher when I started it. I was like at 6.0 or something when I started, and it went up to, I think, 19 for the top. And then even with that increase in insulin, I didn't see ketones fall off. I saw them actually increase. So ketones, in my mind, they are a energetic substrate. And what do we know about energetic substrates in general? We don't like them. And, all due respect to Dr. Berry, we don't like them to be high all the time. in general, because that indicates we're not metabolizing them. We're not actually utilizing it. We like triglycerides to be low. We like glucose to be low and flat. We like fatty acids to be low and flat because it actually means that there's constant turnover happening. So the reason I saw my ketones go up is because I ate a crap ton of fat and my body's like, holy, I got to do something with all this. And you saw my ketones go up and my triglycerides went up and my fatty acids all went up because I had just a ton of excess energetic substrate floating around. My body's like, I got to do something with all of this.
That to me is the Occam's razor. That's why, and I was doing experiments with heavy whipping cream shakes to prove this to myself literally 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I was like, wait a second. I can increase my ketones in the morning if I down a heavy whipping cream shake now. Why? Is it that I've forced in a lot more ketogenesis, that I like front loaded it? Or is there in fact, with all energy substrates, with fuel, a competition, particularly with uptake, and with ketones being lower down on the oxidative list? Is it possible that I can actually get the fatty acids in front in line such that the ketones hang longer? And how much would this apply to people who are metabolically healthy, fit, and active, particularly when they're using so much more of their fatty acids below the neck, right? You need your ketones above the neck especially. It can be used in all your peripheral tissues, but particularly for your brain, you need those ketones for your brain, right? So how could I, even if I was very athletic, even if I was very thin and I was like you, had a 0.5, could I make my ketone levels higher if I bring in more fuel that outcompetes it so that a little bit more is spared? Am I in more ketosis? Am I?
Nope.
Right.
What if you drink 8 ounces of an exogenous ketone?
Right. And this
Are you in deeper ketosis?
Right. And this was the other thing, is this 10 years ago, we're both watching it, we're both excited, and then sure enough, the exogenous ketone companies, I mean, there's like, what, half a dozen of them that just popped up overnight, and they're like, we'll get you in ketosis right away. We can prove it.
You can eat birthday cake and be in ketosis.
Yes. And there you go, exogenous ketones. Now, we don't want to poo-poo exogenous ketones. They do have uses, particularly for like epilepsy and many other things, but exogenous ketones, hey, now you're actually making it, endogenous ketones, now you're actually making it yourself. But getting back to the lean mass hyperresponders, they're feeling left out. They're going, dang it, my BHB is not as high as my friend over here who's sedentary, who's sitting around on the couch and seems to be actually, bumping it up there at around 1.5 to 3.0.
And the reason for that is because those people have a lot more fat stores. They're mobilizing a lot of fat so much that there's actually excess energetic substrate floating around. So that's why people who tend to be in high ketosis are like, hey, my ketones are great, because you're mobilizing your fat, you're utilizing your fat stores, which is great because you're trying to lose weight, but that means you're also at a higher body fat percentage. People who are leaner, they just don't have that much to metabolize. They just turn stuff over constantly. So their ketones, their glucose, their triglycerides all tend to stay low.
This is why I'm so thankful that you're doing these N-of-1 experiments, because in the same way that I was doing them 7-8 years ago, these experiments, the data just teaches you. You cannot help but see these patterns. The pattern recognition keeps coming back, and then you get that excitement of sharing it back to the group. They get to talk about it and theorize on it and so forth. But these dynamics are so relevant to, like, your question from earlier. You've got to look at this in terms of traffic, not just from the snapshot that comes from the blood work. We sell blood work. Oh my gosh. By the way, I'm supposed to pay bills at some point. Please get your blood work at Own Your Labs. I hope you guys are all getting your blood work at Own Your Labs. It's the sole sponsor. We run the entire podcast. We are funding the entire podcast through our company. So you have limited commercial interruption. And
they actually have a Dr. Berry annual lab panel that you can get, and a Dr. Berry thyroid panel, the full thyroid panel that you can get. It's already in as a package deal with a little discount.
Yeah, it's a bundle.
OwnYourLabs.com.
Thank you for the pitch. But getting back to the larger point, blood work is a snapshot. It's a snapshot. You don't know how much is coming in, how much is going out, and at what rates that this is coming in, this is going out, and so forth. This is why, by the way, annual tests, you've got to be mindful of that, because you're getting a once a year snapshot that you just got to know. People like Darius and Nick and I, we know this all too well from doing these rapid experiments, just how much the context, not of the last year or even of the last few months, but of the last few days and the last few hours impacted your blood work. In 4 hours, yes.
Yeah.
So think about that.
And the average doctor literally has no idea. I mean, when I say they have no idea, I'm not overstating that. If you said, hey, I can drop my testosterone 400 points in 20 minutes, they'd be like, no, you can't. I can raise my triglycerides or I can half my LDL in this many days. No, you can't. You can't do that. They literally believe that within just a 10% range, that's it. You can't really affect that. It just is what it is. And so,
Darius, how many times
it's a huge problem in medicine.
have we had somebody come into the group and they post, oh my God, I have triglycerides of 200. And what's the first question all the members know to ask? They go, was it fasted?
Right, right.
And no, it's somebody who adopted a ketogenic diet recently. Their doctor said, oh, while you're here in the doctor's office, let's get your blood work.
Yeah.
They go, oh, well, I ate 3 hours ago. Is that going to mess with my blood? No.
Another huge problem.
Doesn't make any difference.
Yes. The average doctor, when the A1C came out, they didn't understand physiology. They thought, oh, now we've got this A1C, people don't have to fast anymore. I can just check their, and as a doctor who's practiced for 22 years, I can tell you it's super, super convenient to just check people's labs when they're there. Because your lab tech hates it really bad when you say, hey, I've got 45 people coming in the morning at 8 a.m. They don't like that. And so I used to be guilty of this back in my early part of my career. I'd be like, it doesn't matter anymore. You can get it. We can get it while you're here at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 4:45 p.m. It made a huge difference. That was ignorance on my part. Now I know better, thanks in part to what these guys have been doing. But your average doctor does not know that's a real thing. They think, oh, we've got the A1C. You don't have to fast. Every week on Monday Night Live, at least one person says, my doctor said I didn't have to fast for labs. You're telling me I got to fast? I'm like, yes, you have to fast, yes. If you want any kind of replicable number that's usable, you have to fast for 12 to 14 hours.
You also are going to need to care about particularly things like fasted insulin. You need to know what a fully fasted state is telling you about this anti-catabolic hormone that's so core to chronic disease, right? Particularly with diabetes.
Yep.
It's just too important.
It's vital. It's mandatory that you know that. If a doctor does not know you're fasting insulin and you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, your doctor's doing harm. The end. It's just that simple.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. I'm not really expert at this, but I would encourage you over the next couple of days that you guys discuss with Dr. Annette Bosworth the state of ketosis and the ketones in your measures. She is often quoted as saying, you're not in ketosis unless you measure your ketones.
Yeah. Next question.
By the way, I interviewed Dr. Boz yesterday. It's amazing. It's a 5-hour Feldman Protocol, so we'll have to break it up into a couple of parts. Again, getting kind of back to the definition. For me personally, my hard Dave Feldman version, bear with me, is I want to see respiratory exchange ratio. I think, to me, that's the gold standard. I want to actually see you respiring that differential that shows how much you are powered by fat versus powered by carbohydrates. But that's me. It's hard to get that, though. You have to strap something to your face and get in a certain state, so forth. Sorry. I'd like to see 0.7 to 0.75. Wait, did I say it right? Yeah, 7.5. Yeah, but I believe just about anybody could get into that state. Challenge cases are going to have a tougher time, as you know. Diabetes isn't just dysregulation. You can actually have more gluconeogenesis, rounding up a lot. But yes, I'm definitely a big believer that you can have long-standing tissue damage that takes a lot of time to remodel, particularly adipose tissue. And you just have to know it's a long journey. You have to know that, right? But adipose tissue, what a revolution we're living through, because it wasn't just, 15 years ago that it was thought to just be this cold storage, this place you just stuff stuff. And now, everybody should understand it's an extremely active endocrine organ, and we're still discovering adipokines. We're up to maybe 200 or something like that. So it is sending out signals. It is a symphony, right? And the liver is like the conductor, and they are working very closely together. And so as those things are getting hypertrophic and they're getting more and more diseased, and there's macrophages attending to it, and it's just getting worse and worse, the symphony is getting broken down. And that's a serious issue. And for somebody like me who loves watching the lipid traffic, right? It's exciting, but the problem is that resistance, the insulin resistance and everything that's going down the pike, it's having such an effect on all of that.
So a quick follow-up on the original question. You mentioned, that you've published your hemoglobin A1C and your fasting blood sugar. I wondered, it's just a question, not something you can answer potentially, but could it be that people who are LMHR tend, even in ketosis, to have higher hemoglobin A1Cs and higher fasting insulin? That's just I'm wondering, because I live with an LMHR, I'm not one myself, and even in ketosis, he also has a higher hemoglobin A1C. He also has, a higher fasting insulin despite ketosis.
What's the fasting insulin?
His fasting insulin is 3, but his fasting blood sugar is around 90.
Right. Why is that scary?
Well, it might not be. I'm just saying that it could be. The hemoglobin A1C, though, is like getting to be like 5, from it used to be lower, and now it's like 5.5, about to be 5.6.
That's not scary.
Do you think it's going to continue going up?
No, I have no idea. I don't know.
So I don't want to, I want to emphasize that this is indeed a hypothesis that I've just expressed, and I'm going to express that again. We ultimately need to study. But Darius might know the answer to this. How many have we known that have this phenotype that I'm describing, who have had progressively higher and higher A1C, where they're getting up to 6.5 and 7.0 and so forth? And I've never seen it.
Nor have I.
Right. So there's
not one.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's shock, right? Like, how is this even possible? I have no carbs in my diet at all, like none. How could I possibly have fasting glucose that's this high? I have like nothing going on. And my A1C is sky high. In their mind, it's sky high, right? And again, all of these reference ranges that we're looking at, they're based on populations with pathology. But if you go to any actual diabetic and you're throwing a CGM on them, it's going like this. It's going like crazy. If you're looking at the fasting glucose, it's also not consistent at all. Why? Because there's a dysregulation. That is the pathology of diabetes, right? It's an incapability of getting to that homeostasis. And so to that extent, that's what I'm looking for. And I'm not seeing it. I don't feel like these two can be connected. A1C is a fantastic but blunt tool.
With many caveats.
With many caveats.
Yes.
Nick, it looks like you wanted to comment on it. Go ahead.
Kind of a silly, I don't know if you can hear me. Do Do you know if anybody's ever done a study on red blood cell half-life in people who are low carb or carnivore? There's one
No,
obvious
not in
fact.
keto or carnivore. That has been done with radio labeling, but not in even low carb keto or carnivore. No.
Because I have, yeah,
That'd
I've
be
seen
brilliant.
discrepancies in like what an average blood sugar would be predicted by an A1C versus if you're actually wearing a CGM. And for those who don't know, a hemoglobin A1C is glycated hemoglobin on red blood cells. So if you have a change in just the lifespan of the red blood cell, that can create an artificial skew. And I don't even think it's been investigated.
No. There's actually two little subatomic things that are on the cell membrane of the erythrocyte. One of them, as the erythrocyte ages, one of them increases, the other decreases. The spleen has the capability to measure, to see that as the blood goes through the spleen. And when one gets low enough and one gets high enough, the spleen pulls that erythrocyte and recycles it. That's how it's done. I've forgotten the names of it. I was researching this a couple of years ago. And so that's why it makes perfect sense that if you're eating a nutrient-dense diet that's uninflammatory, that those levels probably don't go as fast. And so, yeah, the erythrocyte is aging. It's probably, you kind of in your mind, you think, oh, it's getting kind of ragged and jagged and, it's limping with one little red blood cell leg. But in reality, what's happening is these two little markers are doing this. And when the spleen sees that, it's like, that one's done, pull it and recycle it. And that's what actually happens.
Okay.
But that'd be an amazing study. Please do that.
I don't know why it hasn't been done. It's just one of those things that will be an obvious answer that's never been investigated.
There's so many things like that.
Okay, right in this room, would anybody be surprised if I've been militantly keto for the last couple months and I go and do an oral glucose tolerance test and I fail it?
No.
What? Why though? Has there been a study that's looked closely at people on a ketogenic diet doing oral glucose tolerance tests that you get? Are you informed by that? Is that where your opinion comes from? Okay, you've done it, but everybody else who shook their heads right now, are you informed by an opinion based on a study that you saw? Or is this well known? Is it well known that people on a ketogenic diet fail oral glucose tolerance tests?
It's well known in this group.
It's well known in this group. Oh, good to know.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah.
But it should be like weeks.
Yeah, it should be weeks.
It actually gives wrong instructions.
Yep.
Yeah.
It takes like several weeks to adapt. It says 3 days.
So given I would be failing that test, am I therefore diabetic? Is so wait, but that's a test for diabetes, right?
Mhm.
Well, okay, then an A1C is also a test for diabetes. So I'm pre-diabetic right now, right? Yeah, yes. By the way, and Nick is homozygous FH, just as a heads up. So obviously, and this is the engineer in me that gets very animated because I'm like, wait, different context. How can we evaluate this context? And what often happens, especially for people who are not in favor of low carb, is to go, oral glucose tolerance failure. These people are all diabetic.
Yeah.
They've actually
And have insulin suppression.
They have insulin suppression, right? They need carbohydrates to reverse the diabetes that the carnivore diet is bringing about, as indicated by this marker in this context, right? So, oftentimes, this gets back to the mountain I'm climbing on that I don't want to get over here on this mountain also, but by golly, this one drives me nuts because it's so common in Lean Mass Hyperresponder Facebook group that I've often thought, you know what, maybe I'll write up a post this. Nope, I'm not going to do it. I step away from it.
Yeah. And I would like to just add, as a family doctor, it makes me very happy to be in a room of people that are concerned about a systolic blood pressure of 125 and an A1C of 5.5. I love you, okay? And the reason I talk less and less about this stuff is not because I think it's esoteric at all, but all the mavericks and the early adopters are already in the room. I'm going after the late adopters and the laggards, and they don't give a shit about any of this. They just want me to tell them what to do, and so they can get on with their life. Does that make sense? And so that's who. So if you hear me talking about just eat this and you don't have to worry about any of this, it's not I'm discounting this. This is super important. That you absolutely need to do the erythrocyte glycation study immediately. Okay, you know what I'm saying? This stuff is super important.
Yeah.
But for you guys understand that Mavericks and early adopters, that's only about 15% of the population. That leaves 85% of the population who think we're all nuts.
Yeah.
Because they haven't adopted this yet, right? They haven't gotten to where we're at yet. That's who I'm trying to get and who I'm trying to reach and save. So never think that I'm like, oh, this is not important. This is not important. This stuff is super important. And we need those articles in the literature because the Maverick, early adopter, late adopter, that thing, that applies to doctors too. It applies to PhDs too. It applies to every human on planet Earth. And so there will be, and guess the the laggards are the endocrinologists. They'll be the last people to begrudgingly say, fine, eat a proper human diet, it's fine. Fine.
So my second question, which was my bigger question, you guys just tied into perfectly. So you talk about the failure of a glucose tolerance test, which is so common in people who've been on a ketogenic diet. Dave, you also, I can't remember how you said it, when you are meticulously following keto, how did you call it when you're?
Fat adapted?
No. But like
Militant keto.
militant, yeah.
Militant keto.
So
yeah.
there are times, if you are on a ketogenic diet for a very long period of time, that you might not feel like being quite as militant at times, okay? And I'm somebody who's done a lot of travel, so this is a question I'm asking for myself personally. There are certain countries that I like to travel to that ketogenic diets are a little rough to do. And I've worn a CGM when I travel to those countries, and I sometimes don't feel like I'm really experiencing the culture in its fullness if I'm even trying to stay ketogenic in those places. So truth be told, I don't. And my CGM data is so flipping scary. I mean, and my husband scares me even more. I mean, we're huge jump, like from a CGM that stays under 110 forever and ever and ever to like 60 or 70 or sometimes even higher jumps after certain meals. So I know that is in general dangerous. I'm hoping, I don't know that we know, that maybe in fits and starts occasionally on a yearly basis or every other year, whatever, if you do something like that, you're hopefully strong enough that hormetic effect is not going to kill you right away. But the question is, for people who are fat adapted and primarily very low carbon keto, are those fluctuations in blood sugar that happen, should you choose to have a birthday cake or should you choose to go on a trip and throw your CGM away, are they particularly more dangerous for them than for a standard, more insulin used to, insulin?
You're actually touching on a subject I have an affinity for, but I want to let you
Okay,
answer
so
first.
that was actually my other burning
it's a
question
great
I had.
question.
But you guys
so
really
if you're just keto or carnivore, just faithful, but then you go to Italy, you're not going to have the pasta, really? I wouldn't, but I understand. I just think you're rationalizing. You want the pasta, but I'm just playing. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I don't think it's a big deal. And the reason if it's occasional like that and it's maybe seasonal, because I think there's probably an argument for eating seasonally because so many of our ancestors did that for so many millennia. The reason that matters, that's not an appeal to nature, as a lot of our detractors like to say. Okay, adaptation is a real scientific thing. The reason cows do best when they eat grass is because cows have eaten grass for a long damn time. Okay, does that make sense? And so if you start feeding a cow meat, it's not that the meat's inherently bad for the cow. It's that the cow has not adapted, has had no time to adapt to that. So I think that when you look at anthropology and archaeology, we see that every human tribe, everywhere at all times, there were periods where there were increased carbohydrates. And we 100% of the time ate those. There's nobody 5,000 years ago saying, I don't eat blueberries.
Trying to watch my weight.
Nobody did that, okay? You get kicked out of the tribe for dumb shit like that, right? You ate the blueberries, you ate the honey, you ate the whatever was ripe at that time, because there was a definite chance that you could starve to death in the winter if you didn't do that. And so I think the human body is perfectly capable of dealing with occasional. We would now call them indiscretions. But big picture, I don't think that's an indiscretion. I think you're just kind of mimicking a seasonal pattern, as long as it's rare and not like, oh, I only do it with days with a Y in it. That could be a problem, of course. But if it's just when you travel and rarely, I don't think it's a big deal at all. That you might disagree.
So I have a complex opinion. Bear with me.
That's weird.
Yes. I've been very upfront in my own podcast about this. I am not militantly keto 24/7 all the time. I want to say I'm 95% low carb in keto, I believe, with 5% being really like off diet, and often it is when traveling. So that is the more likely scenario. Now, for what it's worth, I am mindful of adaptation curves. Something I would be mindful to not do, and I don't think I ever have, is where I'm fully fat adapted, militantly keto, and then I go somewhere cool for a weekend where there's like a food that I really want to indulge, and I binge on it, right? So I'm stuffed with that. I actually genuinely think is dangerous. I actually think Darius is going to agree with me on this one, by the way. Yeah. So I'm definitely a believer in getting back to those cells, getting back to the milieu, right? There is adaptation. David Ludwig has lots of material on this. You can talk to Nick about this. He's published with him a lot on this as well. There's adaptation periods. And it actually shows up in a lot of the N of 1 experiments I was doing originally, including the one that I've published on, where you can quite literally see the change over time. Because when you get really deep down into the nucleated cells, there literally is the transcription and translation to literally make the enzymes that are more appropriate for the milieu of the difference of the fuel substrates. So there really is like the same things I was talking about with, the glutes and GLUT4 in particular, that doesn't just instantly appear, right? Like there actually is a little bit of interchange with working into this new scenario. And then you get into a lot more of these like longer chain proteins and how long they take to set up. So what am I saying here is I'm unlikely to go from strict keto to suddenly having an 80% carb diet for like 2-3 days. I think there's a pretty decent chance that actually is not good for me and may even be really dangerous, but particularly if I binge, that I'm not just at 80%, but I'm actually, I've seen signs of even when I've had a large meal once in a single day after being militantly keto, particularly with the experiments that I was doing, the carb swap experiments. That's like a longer story. So the binging is a concern of mine. If I'm going to travel, I am going to actively try to adapt a bit more, but I also have one other thing, which Sharon knows pretty well. If I'm going to have a cheat meal, try to keep it to one meal. And I try to aim for earlier in the day. I try not to have, I just generally speaking, if I'm not fully on diet, I just generally get even more mindful to not eat later at night. That I think can be a lot more dangerous. I don't want to be going into my circadian rhythm with a lot of insulin. I just don't think that that's ever really good for you in general.
Would you make that gradual, like before the Italy trip, you're gonna have like a bite of bread just so it's not a shock when you have the bowl of pasta?
Yeah, so here's a good example of a halfway halfway treat for me is I'll have bread with my burgers, right? So the buns, if you will, on the burger. I'm still technically low carb, but now the carbs are coming in such that I can feel that I'm probably getting to a greater degree of adaptation, right? For what it's worth, I make a distinction between starch and I try to avoid fructose in general. And I don't think even when I do experiment with having carbs or allow for having more carbs, that I have fruit or high fructose corn syrup or anything fructose related. But I do believe that frankly, that there is a larger metabolism consideration with that. And I also previously had fructose malabsorption. Long before I was even into nutrition, I discovered this was a major issue, that I had gut issues when I was having anything with fructose in it. But also just what I've learned that, Lustig, actually a lot of his research kind of got me a little bit more interested in, if I'm gonna have carbs, it's probably on that side of the fence. So.
I would like to say, you can actually pass an oral glucose tolerance test on keto. I've done it. You just have to be very, very insulin sensitive. If you have any bit of insulin resistance and you're on keto and you do an oral glucose tolerance test, you definitely will fail. And when you travel, enjoy life. I mean, that's the whole point of travel, right? I found the same thing though. Like when I went to Greece, my glucose, I was like, you know what? I'm going to eat all the things. And my glucose responded accordingly because I brought my CGM with me. And I did labs prior to and before and after the trip. And my fructosamine shot into the 300s. And my LP(a) actually like doubled, which, a lot of people say you can't even do that, but mine did. As far as is it dangerous or not, my talk tomorrow actually will be a little bit about that topic, where I tend to think that even transient glucose spikes are a problem. The best thing to do though is, again, enjoy life, but try to mitigate the damage. Like Dave was saying, I'm gonna have some of the pasta. I'm in Italy. I'm gonna have a little bit of the bread. Just have a little bit, and then like everybody's around, you're in Italy. Walk afterwards. That's going to reduce your glucose. That's going to reduce your glucose spike. Do meal order. Do your fiber, your protein, then the carbs at the end. That'll reduce the glucose spike as well. There's also several studies out there showing that vitamin C supplementation at the time of hyperglycemia actually reduces the oxidative stress caused by the spike. So myself, when I do plan to indulge, I try to do all those things: food order, walk afterwards, and go ahead and take some vitamin C, and vitamin E as well has the same effect. If I'm gonna go big, I'll take both. And try, again, walking afterwards, really, really important.
That's actually a good point, Darius. I should have mentioned that as well. And in the case of where we're traveling, we're usually walking a lot. We're usually taking stairs all over the place. And so you do have more of that active disposal. Virtually all of the fitfluencers you see, particularly if they're more middle-aged, so it could count a bit more for them, that are on high carb diets, often are very athletic, right? I don't see a lot of middle-agers who are pretty sedentary, but also on an extremely high carb diet at the same time. That tends to be a little less common. But yeah, that's all the more reason that if you're wanting to indulge, if you're wanting to step over a little bit more on the carb side of the fence, hey, make sure those glycogen stores get turned over. Make sure you actually burn it off. All right.
Okay, so you mentioned tissue damage, and this might not have an interesting answer, but for me, incidental finding found a liver hemangioma. And my doctor goes, so many people have those and they just don't even know it. But I don't know, those answers are so not satisfying. And I'm just curious what you think about, someone who, I previously had metabolic dysfunction and reversed that. Here's this liver tissue, scar tissue. What do you think about hemangiomas, especially if they're on a liver?
Yeah. So doctors have told us so many times that so many things, oh, don't worry about that.
Yeah. So.
Right? That now you're like, but okay, but should I worry about that? I don't know. So in this case, your doctor's probably right.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a stable hepatic hemangioma. It's just like having a mole on your skin. It's like having a cyst on your ovary. It's just ubiquitous. Ubiquitous. He's right. If you scanned 1,000 people, probably 45% of them have a little hemangioma.
Yeah.
On their liver. It's not a big deal at all. But you see the like, I don't know. You see that? We shouldn't have that with our doctors. And that's part of that trust that's been broken. Like she's like, I don't know. He said he wasn't cheating, but I mean, yeah, is he cheating? Right? That's literally what you just said about your doctor. Is he lying to me? I don't know.
The prompt of the tissue damage. Okay, maybe I'll open this up again, but I mean, I mostly trust it. Mostly.
You hear this? It's literally, yes. And so that's part of the reason building up new organizations. So you can be like, okay, they've never lied to me. So, or misled me. And just to be clear, doctors have a fiduciary duty to you. They've taken an oath, but they also have a legal fiduciary duty to you. It's their job to know. And that's part of the reason I wrote the book, and part of the reason I insisted that the title be as objectionable as some doctors think it is if your hairdresser says, oh, that hemangioma is nothing to worry about, they don't have any duty to give you the right answer, but doctors have the duty. That's their job. And so if they don't do that, not only are they a shitty doctor, but they're also legally liable and like can be held in judgment, rightfully so. And so it's so sad that we've gotten this far down the road where you're like, I don't know, my doctor said this, but who knows? Yeah, but it's probably fine.
I wouldn't want to stir the pot by any means, but also they can be wrong. They're, as you said, chicks and dudes. He could be wrong about chicks. That's right. He could be wrong about this diagnosis. It's possible. Me personally, I really like inflammatory markers. So when you talk about damage, right? Damaged tissue going to release these cytokines that ultimately, particularly things like IL-6 and so forth, they will ultimately start getting a higher level of what's known as acute phase reactants. And of course, one of the favorites to look at is C-reactive protein. I love C-reactive protein. It can give false positives, but it very rarely gives false negatives, right? So if it's low, odds are pretty decent that you don't have a high level of systemic inflammation. And if you've got something like damage, if you've got something your body's immune system is working through in that regard, then typically you see a higher level of C-reactive protein.
Yep. And right. I'm going to bet you know your CRP, and I'm going to bet your CRP is normal.
It's funny, it was elevated for a time, and that period passed, and yeah, I think that was during a time of some metabolic dysfunction back then.
Yeah, so she said her CRP is normal.
Yeah, back then. I'm not too worried, I was just, funny.
Yeah, no, I totally get it, yeah.
Question, how do you handle those people or suggestions that just, they need it, but they don't want to hear it? Case in point, Dad has dementia. We've tried numerous times to try to get just diet change, simple things to do in the kitchen. Mom's medicine cabinet or her closet looks like a pharmacy from heaven for those who love drugs. They ask us, it's frustrating. Like you said, Dave, you don't want to be that person that comes in and they say, oh, here they are again, we're going to hear about it.
Yep.
Any suggestions or how you're handling this with people that need to make that simple change, but just you hit a wall every time you talk to them?
How many times do we hear this in the group? All constantly, right?
Yeah.
So how old is Dad?
82.
82. And how severe is his dementia?
It's getting worse in the last 4 months.
4 points in the last 4 months.
Yeah. And Mom's in great health or?
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Multiple.
Surgeries, arthritis.
And they live how far away from you?
They're in Ohio.
We're here in Nevada.
Yeah. So all you can do is all you can do.
Right.
This is something we all have to come to grips with, including Dave with his family. You with your family. All you can do is all you can do. Are you prepared to move to, or
No,
move
because they
them
won't
to?
listen. I mean,
Right,
it's
exactly. See, your parents are grown.
Right.
If they were your kids, you could just spank them and make them do whatever, but you can't do that with your parents. You can't do that.
I can tell you what's worked with a few.
Yeah, and there are tips and tricks and strategies, but you have to be prepared to go, okay, I love you, Dad, and you're a grown man. You do what you want to do. I love you. And I've tried to, but what you don't want to do, especially with an any elderly person with dementia, is argue, berate, force, cajole. You don't want to do any of that, because that's the dementia. That's just going to make everything worse. And it can stay worse for weeks. And it's just not worth it. And sometimes it's just too late to do anything about it. But it's never too late to say I love you and to show I love you.
For a few of my challenge cases, it has worked for me to pitch a trial period. So I say, give me just 30 days. If you give me 30 days, I will be with you through the whole period. I'll help you make the food. I'll help you bring everything. Let's just get your blood work at the beginning, and let's just get it at the end. And you know what? Whatever happens, if on the 31st day you're like, I just want to get back to eating, at least we will have gathered information to find out, and you can see how you feel. You don't even need to commit to anything beyond that. And what I like about that is, from their perspective, it's how I get off their back, right? They weren't that serious about making a life change anyway. Okay, fine. For you, Dave, for you, fine. Let's just do this. But by the same token, a fixed amount of time always feels much more accomplishable than feeling like, oh God, you're making me, listen, this is the only joy I have in my life. How often do you get this from family, where it's like, you're trying to take the one thing that soothes me in my life, and I'm not a nut, right? How many times you get, you're a health nut, or whatever, I could never eat that diet, right? But often you can say, look, just 30 days, and spoiler alert, for two of them, it had to drop down to 2 weeks, but at least I got them to do 2 weeks. And one of those 2-week people turned out to be a success story.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so frustrating because you hit a wall, and then when something bad happens, or there's an episode with the dementia, the mother will call upset, what do I do? What do I do? And we're like, we told you, we've been telling you for the last 2 years how to do that, and to take those changes. But, and then my brother's in the pharmaceutical sales. So, hey, let's put him in a study for 2 years, which they did, but they won't give us 2 weeks or 30 days.
Sometimes life gives us problems that we can solve, and sometimes life gives us dilemmas that there is no solution to. There's only less bad choices that you can make. And that sounds like where you're at. And that's, exactly 100%. That's exactly what you do in that situation. Unless you're prepared to move them, or you're going to move and you're going to be daily. And even then, that probably wouldn't make it. Yeah.
A physician down in Florida, who specializes in this, and he said, I will take all costs out, just get them here. 30 days. And they wouldn't go.
Yeah.
We said there's no cost.
Yeah. So it's time to put this aside.
You've done what.
Yeah.
There's the challenge cases that worked for me. There's challenge cases that didn't. Yeah. And I've been there. It's you, because you're like, I only have one of that person.
Let me ask you a question and be honest. Have you done all you can do?
To this point, I think we have.
Then you've done all you can do.
Last question, and we have about 10 minutes.
Hi, I wanted to jump back just a little bit to the glucose tolerance test discussion. I was just looking at some of my results. I've been intensely keto for about 12 years and carnivore for about 5 now. And I've been working with Dr. Brewer on some issues that I've seen. But, and by the way, I'm 70 years old. But my last glucose tolerance test started 88 with peaked up an hour later to 136 and then was back down to 99 or so 2 hours later. So it looks like I don't have a problem responding to that overload of glucose, which, by the way, tasted horrible. I've found that since I lost my carb addiction a long time ago, I'm not even tempted to do crazy binge eating. I do enjoy nice food, but I enjoy meat better now. Anyway, that's another N of one, but I just didn't know if you had any comments on that or if that was unusual outside of what you normally see.
It's a little unusual because I assume it's OGTT with 75 grams of
That's right.
carb solution, right?
That's right.
Yeah. A little unusual, but yeah, it sounds. Can I ask how active are you?
I'm a cyclist, so
Okay.
I've been doing that since I was 16, and I probably ride, I don't know, 100 miles a week or so.
Okay, so that makes me a little less surprised.
Okay.
Your skeletal muscle is like Nick's.
Well, my last DEXA scan said I'm at less than the top 1% of men my age for lean body mass.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't feel like it, but
You're winning. Yes, you're winning.
All right. Please give a warm round of applause to our special guest, Ken Berry.
Thank you.
I have to say this has been a lot of fun for me and just the right size crowd. This is I'm so glad we got to do this. And Ken, thank you so much for coming on the Feldman Protocol, the first live recording of the Feldman Protocol.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Now, I normally finish the podcast with this. Where do people find you?
So I've got a little YouTube channel. If you just search Dr.
Few
Berry.
subscribers.
Yeah, you can find me. And I've got over 1,900 videos. And so the best way to use it is to go to the search feature and type in Dr. Berry and whatever medical condition you're concerned about, like hepatic angioma or worried well or whatever. And if I've got a video, it'll pop up. And that way you don't have to watch all 1,900. If I'm feeling snarky, you'll find me on Twitter.
Is
X.
worried well treatable?
It is not treatable.
Okay.
It is
I
terminal.
was curious about
you
that.
never ever cure that. Oftentimes a mom will have it with her kid, and by proxy. But then if I'm feeling loving and helpful, I'll be on Facebook and Instagram. I got 3 books. Lies My Doctor Told Me, Common Sense Labs, which I'm surprised we didn't talk about. And then I wrote a book with a friend of mine called Kicking Ass After 50. And right now I'm working on a book called In Search of the Proper Human Diets, which hopefully will be available for pre-sale before the end of 2026. But we'll see how my ADHD goes.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much.